Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Cross Commission podcast. My name is Jake Nazar. I am joined by my good friend Saif Fakadu. Saif, how you doing?
Jake, oh man, loving life. Weather's great. 90 degrees today. It's hot.
It's hot. It was hot. Yes, 100%.
This is always the time I kind of love it. It gets too hot in June and July, but like this, March, April, when it's kind of still cool in the morning. It's a little bit warmer in the afternoon, but still like a little brisk.
I have not worn a jacket to work all week. Normally, I mean, for my jacket, I'm not referring to suit jacket. I've never worn a suit at work. But like I'm not wearing a jacket like on my way in. Like more. I also could. My classroom is so hot that I think if I wore like an actual like long button down or something, like I'd be like, what was it? Sure, that Sean Miller. I feel like just profuse. I didn't be like John Thompson with the towel or something.
Change the shirt at noon. Yeah,
I have to change it out. I have not worn jacket. I don't know if I'm going to need one the rest of the year. Next week sounds low or early 40s morning. That's fine. Sunny. High of like 65, 67. That's perfect.
That's
a beautiful day.
That's a cross commission zone right there.
Between 40 to 50 in the morning, top out at 70, it's like the Billy Bob. Like you want oil to be above 60 but below 90.
That's not, you can still make a profit, but not enough in turns. It's just a pinch. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Happy Tax Day, everybody. I hope if you're listening to this, you have filed, or if you have any extensions, something like that. I got mine all done.
Absolutely.
So happy about that. Happy Jackie Robinson Day.
Oh yeah.
Major League Baseball. I think that's everything. Happy Hopkins, Maryland this weekend. Obviously, I will be there. We've been talking about it. Sellout crowd anticipated after Army Navy last weekend. A gigantic crowd. Should be another huge crowd at Homewood for the rivalry this weekend. We're going to talk about rivalries later in the show. We're going to talk, about obviously all the games. As we're in the last big Saturday of the regular season. Even this Saturday is a little lighter just because there's two Big Ten games on Friday night. But after this, it's kind of, next Saturday, because you got the Big Ten, everything's kind of laid down. It's sort of the last until. See, you're totally gonna do that season bit, aren't you?
I was just gonna say it's the last weekend before the end of the year, really, because like as soon as it's May, summer, it's just gonna go like that. Right to fall, and then it's the holiday season. Like November, like the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, it's just a blur. So really, just savor this, enjoy it. This is like before things really get hectic. Yeah, I do collapse, but it really does. As soon as the season, like conference tournaments, conference tournaments start next weekend with the big.
Yeah,
definitely.
That's true. Yes, that's
and so like there, it's just like now the games are do or die type, it's essentially by. And then, May is just great, because of the big first weekend and then the money round. And then it goes right into Memorial Day. And it's like kind of I think it's like one of the earliest or the earliest Memorial Day that it could be in May because, it's like the way it falls to season. So, yeah.
All I'm thinking in my head is the John Voight scene in Heat with De Niro where he's like, it's a free country, brother. Because in a different society, we would, I'd have the secret police just, like, what did I say? Yeah, sir, have you seen your comments about the end of the year in May?
It's a Liz Lemon thing, man. We've had a great. That's what I'm going to say on Selection Sunday, but man, it's been a great year. You're like, it's Mother's Day. What are you talking about?
It's like that means just like sort of the MPs are downstairs. Like, just please take it away.
Yeah. Is it like the FBI's downstairs?
Safe, they're just off screen. They're ready to escort you. Do with them as you please.
You just look away.
Safe defense.
Jake, you're like,
Safe defense of this every week is kind of how I was reacting when Twitter blew up over Princeton being number one in our poll this week.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll get there. Princeton was number one in the Crosse Commission top 20 for this week. They were not number one in the Inside Lacrosse Media poll. Notre Dame was 1, Princeton was ranked 2. Should be noted that Safe, who did have Princeton ranked number 1 in our poll and in his media ballot, was not the only person to rank Princeton number 1. 3 other voters also ranked the Tigers as their top ranked team. In our poll, myself, Adam, and Safe, or Adam, Safe, and I should say, all had Princeton ranked number 1. Ryan and Chris had Notre Dame ranked number 1. Chris, of course, votes in the media poll as well. On all ballots, Princeton and Notre Dame were our top 2 teams. And this did spark some debate, heated kind of topic. I gotta be honest, Safe, I did not anticipate this to be such a sort of hot button kind of topic for a number of reasons. I'll start. Number one, it's a difference of 1 vote, literally. It's if I typed in, Notre Dame by accident instead, like Notre Dame would have been number 1, or if any one of us changed our vote, Notre Dame would have been number 1. So, and again, all of them were ranked top 2. So it literally was as close as it could possibly get. Number 2, it's not as if Princeton has not put together a pretty impressive resume, or not been pretty impressive themselves up to this point of the season. Princeton beat Penn by about a dozen goals on Saturday. They've beaten 2 top 5 teams in Syracuse for 1, and North Carolina, who Notre Dame just beat this past weekend to become the number 1 team in the country. Pardon me. They've also beaten Maryland, a win that looks better and better as the season goes along. And they've beaten Yale, and they've beaten Penn. Let's talk about Princeton. If you go by the RPI, Princeton has 5 top 20 wins. Notre Dame, just for comparison, also has 5. If you actually go by the RPI kind of buckets, top 5, top 10, top 20, it's basically identical. Notre Dame has 2 top 5, Princeton has 2 top 5. They both have an extra top 10. They both have 2 top 20. So not as if Princeton hasn't kind of proven themselves. For one, in our poll, Princeton was ahead of Notre Dame last week. So I know that was different than the media poll, which had was obviously Carolina and Notre Dame was number 1 versus number 2. But we had Princeton ranked 2nd last week. So in that sense, for us, it was just kind of a normal kind of procedure. And so also Notre Dame, excellent last 2 weeks, super impressive performances. They are in a really good spot right now to potentially kind of solidify themselves maybe as the number 1 seed. They're the number 1 seed in bracket projections at the moment. If they won out the rest of the season, they certainly could still remain in that position. But it's a very good Notre Dame team. I don't know. I get the impression based on the feedback we got seemed that it was like I don't know. Basically, to me, it's incongruous to talk about how this is a wide open season and anybody can sort of win the championship, and then kind of vociferously demand that one team be ranked number 1. I don't think that kind of squares, in my opinion, at least. And that's not to say that if you had Notre Dame ranked number 1, that's a wrong belief. But I guess just the reaction to it caught me by surprise a little bit.
Well, Jake, you know who else had Notre Dame as number 1? The Crosse Commission podcast for 4 the polls. Like only from week 3 through week 7, Notre Dame was number 1. Like, when you lose, like you drop, and they beat Richmond, the week after they lost to Virginia. But like to use that now is like, oh, we beat the number 1 team in the country, and a lot of people were like calling Richmond a fraud watch after especially the way Notre Dame jumped on them. So it's kind of can't have it both ways. And yeah, beating North Carolina, great one. And you know who else had that with? Princeton. You get I think you pointed out pre-pod, and I'll definitely let you expand on it. Like, one of the best arguments you could have made is this, like, Notre Dame thoroughly dismantled North Carolina, whereas Princeton was a pretty close game at home by them by 2.
An argument that I did not see a lot of people make, for the record. I think that's the most compelling argument to have Notre Dame number 1, if you were to make the argument.
And they make the point about they lost to Cornell, for sure. But outside of one quarter against Penn State and a Cornell game that, you're in hindsight, or especially immediately thereafter, I didn't give as much credence to how well Cornell dominated that game and was in control. Like, still two goal win. Like, a couple things bounce around. Chronic has just like a replacement level game, maybe that is a different story. But aside from that, like, they've been on a 4-game winning streak, and the victory against Penn was 20-8. Like, it was also a top the 20 RPI team. So it was like Princeton has the wins. They pretty much have the same wins as Notre Dame, but with the Syracuse win on top of that, and the Penn win. They got a big Harvard game this weekend. Could be another potential top 10 RPI. And then, like, if they somehow swing it and host the Ivy League tournament, potentially get a rematch against Cornell. So it's just like, it's not some also ran team that is just like we threw it, like, I don't want to like throw some team under the bus, but definitely not like outside of Princeton was like 8th, and then we bumped up to 1. They're literally number 2 the weekend prior. So when Richmond lost, like, and Princeton so thoroughly dominated Penn, like, it wasn't. I didn't think. And again, like, it was one vote. Like, literally, and Notre Dame's my dark horse. I have nothing but a reason to make them number 1. But you even believe in ethical voting here. So it's just like, Princeton's like peak Princeton, peak Notre Dame. I think Princeton would win, and that's kind of how I flipped it. Like, they're both excellent. I have Notre Dame too. I think if we average it out, Notre Dame's probably as high an average rank throughout the year as Princeton, probably higher. Because I know when Princeton lost to Penn State, I definitely dropped him. I was like, well, what's going on here? And so, like, really, I think the average pole position, I think Notre Dame has definitely no bias. Like, it's just how it felt. There's one vote.
Well, and to me, it's also a reflection of it's all just the dynamics of the poll. Look, our poll is a smaller group, so there at times definitely we've talked about this. We've talked about this on the pod. At times we can kind of be prone to hive mind a bit. We also talk about, like, how we discuss the poll in the top 20. We kind of peer, sort of check it. I think at times that can kind of lead to groupthink a little bit. By just being like, how could you have this ranking? When in reality, it's like, maybe it'd be good for someone to, have a bit of a different ranking. I mean, look, I had Harvard ranked 14th this week. That's lower than anybody else by 2 spots. They've had Harvard at 8. Ryan had Harvard at 8. I had them 6 spots lower. I had them ranked behind. I personally I think Harvard had to be ranked behind Yale after what I saw. The Harvard team that I've seen over the past, we talked about this month, like, that I've seen the past couple of weeks, to me, they look like a 13th, 14th place team in the country. Could I rank them in the top 10 based on their previous performance? I could, but to me, at this point of the year, I always say it, I always view the poll as like a reflection of that moment of the season. Right now, Harvard doesn't seem like a top 10 team to me. But like, even if still we can sometimes be kind of, come to the same conclusions, it's not like there aren't differences in our poll. Again, Harvard's a good example of this. I have them ranked, 14th. Me and Adam both ranked Michigan, which might seem a little, like, hey, listen, Michigan beat Penn State. They beat Rutgers. Got 2 pretty good wins the past couple weeks. But all of this comes down to just the poll, how the poll shook out. To your point, in week 1, Princeton was ranked 3rd. Princeton lost to Penn State and fell 9 spots in the media poll. In our poll, Princeton fell, trying to see if I can find it. They fell 7 spots. They fell to 10. I think in hindsight, even at the time, I felt a little bit like, first game of the year against what was a top 10 opponent. Penn State was in the top 10. Penn State's third game. No, granted, I think Penn State had lost time day, so Penn State kind of dropped out. I think that was Penn State had lost the week before, so that's part of it. But still, a Penn State team people were high on. I picked it to make the Final Four. Third game for Penn State, first game for Princeton. Yes, Princeton played poorly in that game for sure. Dropping them 9 spots that's a lot. And so from that point, basically, Princeton has had to build their way back, significantly so, when it comes to the polls. And in, again, week 3, Princeton was ranked, they were at week 2, they were in 12th. They moved up 5 spots after beating Maryland to 7th, and they moved up 4 spots after week 4 to 3rd. In our poll, they were, after they beat, they were 2nd, just behind Notre Dame. So again, kind of we've always kind of been a little ahead when it comes to Princeton, but I think you could argue, I think you could have made an argument for them at number 1 after nothing against Notre Dame, but it's like they beat Syracuse and North Carolina, 2 top 5 teams, on the same weekend. That's really impressive.
Yeah.
You think about it, and it does feel like that's been sort of underplayed or not quite valued to the degree it should. And then another example, to me, this is the best case. Princeton dropped after losing to Cornell. Princeton dropped from 3 to 7. They dropped behind Duke. I'm sorry. There's never a case where Princeton should have been behind Duke in the media poll. I'm just flat out no. Princeton had played a significantly tougher, not orders of magnitude more difficult schedule than Duke had. Duke had 0 losses. Princeton had 2. Obviously, time has since proven this correct, that if Duke had played Princeton's schedule, their record would be much different. I feel like that was even evident at the time. I'm sorry, there's no way you convince me Duke beating Providence and Utah, and Utah, a good team, they're in the top 20 now, or Bellarmine or whomever, was equivalent to Princeton beating Maryland, Syracuse, North Carolina, and losing to Cornell and Penn State. No, it's just, it was just never, different galaxies. And so that dropped Princeton to 7th. Princeton was 2 spots behind Cuse after that loss to, there were 3 spots behind Carolina and 2 spots behind Cuse. Now listen, different people do the poll differently. Some people do it more power ranking. They'll shift it a lot week to week. I personally don't vibe with that as much. Granted, I did with Harvard this week, but also some of it with Harvard for me was the kind of built up over the past couple weeks. The performances have increasingly looked not as good. I just think, to me, my argument I think Princeton's been underrated throughout the season. I just think that we're talking about a team that, one of the things that came up as an argument for Notre Dame was that they were ranked 1st in the RPI. This is true. Princeton's beat the number 2, number 3, and number 10 teams in the RPI. Now, Notre Dame, certainly themselves, has also beat number 2 and number 5. There are good arguments for them to be number 1. Again, it was 1 vote that was the difference. But I think as far as, I just think Princeton throughout the year consistently has been pretty kind of underrated, undervalued for what they've achieved, the teams that they've beaten. And frankly, to me, the product and the quality that we've seen them put on the field. I watched that Penn game. When that team got it going against Penn, it wasn't even a contest. I saw the game against Syracuse. Syracuse has put up some big, gaudy goal totals this year, man. And Princeton held them to 7 goals. And I think Syracuse scored 1 or 2 at the end of the game too, to kind of add to that, pad that out a bit. We can talk about it in a year of defense, where it seems could defense win championships this year. Princeton is 3rd in adjusted offensive efficiency. I think you'd argue they had Harvard 2nd, but the Harvard kind of come back with it. I think for me, I'd argue Princeton is the best offense in the country. If that's not enough for you, they're 10th in adjusted defensive efficiency. That's not enough for you. They're 11th in adjusted face-off percentage. And if that's not enough for you, they're 4th in save percentage. they're a top 10 team in like every area of the field. And a criticism I got was that I've said, based on what I've seen, I felt like my gut tells me, or like just my belief is, Princeton's A game is a little better than Notre Dame's. Like that's just the eye. Like, and I know that eye test sometimes can be used pejoratively. I don't necessarily support the eye test as like a selection criteria. But if I'm doing my poll, yeah, man, the eye test is going to come into play. At the end of the day, the goal here is to rank the teams we think are the best.
It is not even like
team.
You don't even have like even sample size because Notre Dame did play 2 less games. I'm not saying that they wouldn't have but that's 2 more games have to be put on the line, and then if you get another loss, and suddenly you have the same exact like amount of losses as Princeton. So I'm with you. Like I didn't think it was that controversial of a take, and it's separation of 1 like vote on a poll with 5 people. So it's just Notre Dame. Yeah, it's pretty much Notre Dame's pretty much had nothing but after the preseason and our week 0 vote. Like I don't think they were below 5 in our entire poll, and they're like the number 1 for like multiple weeks. Like Princeton falling flat on their face against Penn State. Where they say can't get over a bad first impression. That was a horrible first impression for the season for a lot of people, and it's like they were ranked accordingly, and then they, as you noted, that having to dig out of that hole. So.
Yeah, Notre Dame was ranked 8th in our preseason poll. They were up to 5th by week 2, and then even after losing to losing to Virginia, they fell to number 6.
Yeah. So.
Like, they've been ranked highly all year, and justifiably so. They're a very good team. They've got a bunch of good wins. Again, if you were doing the bracketology projections right now, which we're going to talk about here in a moment, I agree. Notre Dame should be the number 1 seed. I think that's a more than fair interpretation of what's been done up to this point. But yeah, man, like at the end of the day, I think the poll is like, one, like I do disagree with the idea that it doesn't matter. Like if it didn't matter, we shouldn't do it. I think it's good conversation fodder if nothing else. It's a good reflection kind of things to help people, kind of interact with the sport and what we think of the teams. But it's like it is different fundamentally from like picking teams for the NCAA tournament. It's one's opinion. That really is. Your poll is your opinion. So if someone wanted to do a poll entirely on the eye test, I would say I disagree with that. I don't believe that that's how you should do it. But if I looked at your poll and everything was just 100% like, I think this team's better than the other, here's why. Okay. Fair enough. As long as you have a logical kind of internal consistency to it, I have no issue. That doesn't mean how I would do it. But if you want to do your poll like, I think Syracuse should be ranked, second because I think Syracuse is the second best team. Awesome. Tell me why, and I got no issue with that. The poll is your opinion. It's your ranking of the top 20 teams.
It's just one man's thoughts there.
All right. Let's talk about bracketology for a moment here. Next week, we're going to have our friend Mark Hart back on to do a second round of bracketology ahead of what's the landscape a week out from, or we'll be 10 days from Selection Sunday. Yeah. So we'll get him back on for that. A lot has happened since then that's kind of impacted things. We kind of mentioned on that show. I remember that if we feel like we've covered a lot of angles now, there'll be a lot less to cover come next week, and that's true. Certainly still some significant changes in the mix with kind of Yale getting back in there. Maryland's kind of risen since then, but like I think you could certainly argue for a couple teams this weekend. Penn State, Duke for sure, kind of feels like must sort of win if you want a chance at the NCAA tournament. At least in Penn State's case, as an at-large. I think Penn State, if they won an at-large bid, has to win this weekend. I think Duke, Duke obviously needs an at-large. If Duke wants to make the NCAA, Duke has to win this weekend if they want to make the NCAA tournament. Because if they lose, that's basically there is a scenario, Patrick. There is a scenario where Duke loses to Notre Dame and North Carolina beats Virginia. Duke is out of the ACC tournament. Or Notre Dame beats Duke. Yeah, Duke loses to Notre Dame. North Carolina beats Virginia. And Duke is out of the ACC tournament regardless of what happens against UNC, which would essentially end their season. So certainly some kind of pivotal. Ohio State got sort of back in the mix with the win over Hopkins. A loss to Michigan could probably knock Ohio State out of the at-large picture. Maryland Hopkins this weekend. If Maryland loses, you could argue that puts the Terps maybe in AQ kind of territory. So there's a lot of significant games this weekend that by the time we reconvene with Mark next week, we'll kind of definitely check out the picture further. I'm just going to share his bracketology projection just to give you an idea of where he has things. If you haven't seen it, you can go to his account at FieldieStick. I will share my screen now. Mark has Notre Dame after the win over North Carolina as the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Utah versus Robert Morris will be the playing game there. He has Princeton as the number 2 seed. Siena Albany, who, by the way, played the game in honor of Liam Gleason this past Tuesday. Albany beat Siena 9-7 in that game, but he has that as a potential playing game. Carolina down to the 3 seed playing High Point. I should mention the way Mark does his projections, he bases it off of who is first place in the conference. And so right now, High Point is technically first place in the A10. So they're getting that AQ. If you just assume Richmond is going to win the A10 conference tournament, you basically put Penn State as from first 4 out into the field. Carolina 3 against High Point. Syracuse at 4 against Towson. Richmond is the 5 against Loyola. The Hounds are first place in the Patriot League. Feels crazy to say, but Loyola hasn't been in the NCAA tournament in 5 years. So it will be a return to the Hounds if they're able to do that. Harvard currently holding up as the 6th seed, though feels like a team desperately in need of a win this weekend. At least nothing else to get the season kind of back on track. They play Princeton. Georgetown feels like they're doing the Georgetown thing again, kind of running through the Big East. And the Hoyas are in position to potentially be a really tough first-round game for somebody. Hopkins, even after loss to Ohio State as the 7th seed, going up against Virginia. That will be a first-round rematch in Mark's bracket. He has Cornell as the 8th seed, up against, Maryland, who is now into the field as well. I think they were in last week as well in Mark's projections. In his words, there is a clear top 5, but 6th through 10th is an amorphous blob of teams. Harvard, Cornell, Hopkins, Maryland, Virginia, all kind of sort of right in one kind of cluster there together. Again, if you move the cut line back to include, Richmond as getting an AQ and not an at-large, Penn State would be the last team. And I want to take the notes if I'm just talk about Penn State because we tweeted this out, and Patrick Stevens actually did some good research this week about what sort of an unprecedented case Penn State is for the committee potentially. Mark says essentially no bubble right now. Key games upcoming: Notre Dame versus Duke. Basically, the last chance for Duke. If Duke does not win, they're done because they need 2 ACC wins for sure. As we've been mentioning, Duke has no top 20 wins as of this present moment in time. So they need wins, and they need wins bad. Princeton, Harvard. Harvard has 3 tough games left and needs another win. Harvard is locked into the Ivy League tournament, so should make note of that. No matter what happens the rest of the regular season, Harvard does still have a path through potentially winning maybe an Ivy League semifinal, which could maybe do it for them, or if need be, win the Ivy League AQ. They are locked into the Ivy League tournament, but it is not certainly kind of settled for Harvard as of yet. They are 7th in RPI right now, but let's talk about they do need to sort of get back on the horse a bit. Hopkins, Maryland, winner of that game this weekend is essentially a near lock for the NCAA tournament. I'll honestly even say it. I'm more than 95% sure that the winner of that game is in the NCAA tournament. Certainly, if Hopkins wins, they will be in. If Maryland wins, whether it's popular or not, I think 7 wins is going to get Maryland. If Maryland wins this 7, if they lose and then they play in the Big Ten quarterfinal, maybe it gets a little more tricky. But this 7th, I think, would get Maryland in the NCAA tournament.
500. What do you think?
So they're 6-4, right?
Yeah. Say they lose this.
I don't think it's possible for them to finish 500.
Right? If they lose this one and then lose the first round of Big Ten?
Oh no, they're not getting it. No, it's 6-6. No, they have to at least have 7. This is where the Richmond game not being played is kind of a factor in that. No, they have to win. If they lose this one, their Big Ten. If they lose this one, I believe based on the Big Ten tiebreakers, Maryland would be the 3 seed. It depends on how it plays out. If you say Penn State and Ohio State win this weekend, which is no guarantee in the way we've seen the Big Ten go out this year, but if you say Penn State and Ohio State win, and Hopkins beats Maryland, it would be a 4-way tie for first in the Big Ten. And I'm not certain of the Big Ten tiebreakers, but based on how I believe it works out, is that you have to break the tie of those 4 teams with records within that set. And if you do that, Maryland and Ohio State would drop out. Penn State and Hopkins would be separated together. Hopkins would be the 1, Penn State would be the 2, Maryland would then be the 3. And in that case, Maryland would probably play Rutgers again. In this case, it actually works out this way. They would. That's not really going to do anything. So that would get them to a 7th, but I don't think that would be enough at 7-5. They would need to win their Big Ten semifinal against probably Penn State. Maybe. At that point, if Maryland loses this weekend, I think at that point you probably want to win the AQ. Because that's just been my piece always, that 4 wins for Maryland, get them to 7, win 1 Big Ten tournament game, you're safe. The way it's played out for them, I think that they could win this weekend and lose their Big Ten semifinal and probably still get in. But it has to start with winning this weekend. On the end for your J safe, I think if they win, they're definitely safe. I think if they lose, they need 1 Big Ten tournament win. I think just one would do it. Even if it's Michigan, I don't know that other teams are going to have enough opportunities to really supplant Hopkins. Unless, if like Virginia beats North Carolina and Yale goes on a run, that's kind of the scenario where maybe things get a little wonky. But it's like right now, Hopkins has heads-to-head over Virginia and Penn State. I think that will do a lot of cover for them, even if they lose this weekend. Now, again, need to win 1 Big Ten tournament game for sure. Can't take it. They have 1 bad loss to Rutgers. They play Rutgers or Michigan again. Cannot take another bad loss. But I think 8 wins for Hopkins would do it, regardless of how they get. I think that'd be enough. So, would you feel 100% safe? Probably not.
I do. I think if they win this weekend.
This weekend, yes. What if they lose this weekend but beat like Michigan, the Big Ten, and they finish 8-6? Do you feel 100% safe?
I think as long as they get to the Big Ten title game, I feel totally safe.
Well, if they lose, yes, but that'd be 9 wins.
Yeah.
So I'm saying if they lose. I'm saying if they lose this weekend, win their Big Ten quarterfinal against probably Michigan, and then lose the Big Ten semifinal, 8-6. I think they're probably in. I would say I feel pretty good about it. I don't know if I feel 100%.
If they beat Maryland, I feel 60%.
No, I'm agreeing with you. If they beat Maryland, they're in. I'm saying if they lose
back-to-back losses. Back-to-back losses.
Maryland, beat Michigan, probably Michigan would be the opponent.
There's got to be a win there. If they lose to Maryland, beat Michigan, get to the semifinals,
and then lose, they're 8-6.
I think the numbers are just too good. I think
I think they're going to get in. I'm just saying I wouldn't be sitting there on Selection Sunday.
I wouldn't love it. No, I wouldn't love it. But it goes back to what we always say, like who's going to take it from them? Like, because you can always say they'll have as good of a case as Penn State. I mean, the Penn State's got the Princeton one, which is really nice.
They beat them head to head though, which is going to be
That's what I was going to say to counter that, because if in this scenario Maryland beats Hopkins, that would have been good for Hopkins' case against Penn State if they have a matching Maryland win. But I think Rutgers got to get out of the top, get back into the top 20, because then they would just have 0 bad losses. But if I'm looking at same thing with Maryland, if they lose this weekend in the same scenario, win the quarterfinal and then lose,
no,
it feels
I wouldn't feel good.
I don't know, you wouldn't feel good, but who's going to if Duke wins one of the next 2, it doesn't make the ACC tournament. I think Maryland.
I would say Penn State could maybe take it if Penn State wins a couple games, because they have the head-to-head there. Granted, Penn State has 3 bad losses. We'll get to Penn State in a moment. I would say Yale potentially could take it. If Yale wins, gets another big win somewhere, I think that's definitely possible. Virginia's an interesting case because
just Virginia's going to lift all boats. Like once we
Virginia's a tricky case because we kind of did the thing with Virginia where we were like, all right, Virginia's set now. They beat Notre Dame. They got that huge win. Then they beat Duke to kind of box Duke out. Virginia's set. And it's like, what if Virginia loses their next 2 ACC games and finishes like 8 and like? That's kind of, again, they're the last team. They wouldn't be the last team in this case. They'd be, if we put Penn State in for Richmond, they'd be the second to last team. But it's like, I think Virginia's probably going to get in. If Virginia doesn't win another ACC game, I don't know. And this gets back to the Hopkins thing of, I would say the worry scenario would be Virginia starts doing enough work that the head-to-head stops mattering. Like, what if Virginia beats UNC? Then it gets a little... Virginia probably, at that point, can start to maybe be separated of... what if Yale goes on a run kind of here? At the moment, I think, again, for Maryland, I think the goal is get to 8 wins. And 8 wins for these teams, I just think, as you say, I just think it's going to be too... It's just not a lot of these teams have really overwhelming cases. And when you don't have overwhelming cases, I can tell you what the committee usually does. It's lean back on the RPI and the strength of schedule, and that's going to do a lot for these teams. Maryland, top 10 in both. Hopkins, top 10 in both. Let me see if I can find... I'm going to pull up Patrick Stevens' from what he had this week. Just because he ran down some really good numbers on Penn State.
I love that. Yeah, the 2010, and 2022 Penn State and Duke teams respectively.
Yeah. So, listen, I like USA Lacrosse Magazine, but their layout is not exactly easy to follow. They actually don't have like... Jesus. If you go to men on the USA Lacrosse Magazine website, it's like...
Yeah, I had to just Google USA Lacrosse bracketology just to get...
Well, I did, and then it didn't... And then it gave me Jeremy Fowler. So shout out Jeremy. We've had him on the pod before, but like, not the one I'm looking for.
Oh, put in the chat.
Can I find Stevens?
It's
there we go. I got it.
Yeah.
All right. Penn State is a unicorn. Yes. So here we go. Penn State now, I'm just reading kind of from Patrick's work here. Again, you can find this at USA Lacrosse Magazine. I think we retweeted it on our page. With its loss to Michigan on Saturday, Penn State now owns 3 losses outside the top 20. The Wolverines sit at number 30, Navy's 24th, and Villanova, which is 44th, picked off the Nittany Lions in February. But Penn State also has 3 top 10 wins: Princeton, Maryland, and Cornell. The NCAA's RPI archive is complete for men's lacrosse from 2009 to 20, and also includes the relevant document for 2007, which can be found with the right finagling. I'd love to see how he figures. I've tried to do this. I can't do it. I'd love to know how he figures it out. It's possible to go down a rabbit hole. Penn State is on track to be the 19th team to finish in the top 20 of RPI and lose 3 games to teams outside the top 20. One of them was 2018 Penn, which finished with a losing record and was ineligible to be selected. 2018 Penn is subject to one of the all-time great 5 minutes of radio on the Cross Commission podcast, where we said, what if they beat Maryland and Duke in the same week? Wouldn't they have to be number 1? They then lost to Maryland by like 7 goals, and we were like, okay. But then they wouldn't beat Duke. I'm pretty sure, which is awesome. He then add the criteria of earning even 1 top 10 win, and things get very interesting. So this creates a group of 8 teams. 8 teams which had 3 losses, 3 bad losses considered outside the top 20 in RPI, were ranked inside the top 20 of RPI themselves and had a top 10 win. I'm going to read you these teams. 2010 Notre Dame, which was 18th in RPI, 19th in strength of schedule, had a 1 top 10 win and 3 bad losses to Villanova, Fairfield, and Rutgers. Safe? What was the outcome for that 2010 Notre Dame team?
They took it all the way. But yeah, it's got to end. This hottest team in the tournament, and then made a run.
2010 Notre Dame. 2010 is probably, I would say, in the top.
I was going to say, people echoed with that 2010 team about the 2022 team. Like, well, we're going to go again. You've done it again.
Yes. I would say 2010, 22, 20. What's the year I'm thinking of? 2007. Are like the three. Obviously, shout out 96 Bucknell. When I think the three most controversial selections, I think of 2007 undefeated Cornell is seeded fourth, and then plays Duke in the semifinals. Duke was seeded first. Duke beats them on like a last-second goal. 2010 Georgetown, 9th in RPI, 12th in strength of schedule, beat Notre Dame head-to-head. Was left out of the field. Notre Dame had 3 wins in the top 15, 1 top 10 win. Georgetown had none. Also, that was the year Johns Hopkins at 500, like straight up 500. They actually finished. They lost in round 1 and had a losing record. They also got in over Georgetown. You could argue quite in terms of sliding doors here. That's what wound up getting Dave Urich fired. Because Georgetown missed the tournament that year. They fell off in 2011, 2012, and Dave Urich got fired, and Kevin Warren got to Georgetown. If they make the tournament that year, he probably still has a job, at least a couple years after that. Does Warren wind up at Georgetown still? Does he go somewhere else? Fascinating kind of alternate sort of history there. And then 2022, obviously, we've talked about that a million times in this pod. So 2010 Notre Dame's a good case. 2013 St. John's. 20th in RPI, 2 top 10 wins, including one, I believe, over Syracuse, who was the number 1 seed, but lost to Villanova, Stony Brook, and Georgetown. St. John's didn't make the NCAA tournament that year. 2016 Bryant, shout out, 16th in RPI, 1 top 10 win, lost to St. Joe's, Drexel, and Hobart. They weren't really irrelevantly in the mix. 2016 Harvard was the team that was in the mix. I think they were one of the first teams, maybe the first team out, second team out. They were 19th in RPI, 2nd in strength of schedule, 2 top 10 wins, lost to Penn State, Penn, and BU, who were outside the top 20. 2017 Villanova, 16th in RPI, 1 top 10 win, Providence, Monmouth, Delaware. You'll notice something. A lot of lower RPIs. This is this is one way in which things have really shifted. You used to be able to get in with like an RPI of 16, 17, 18. Not really the case anymore. Carolina 2016, I think, is the last team that like got in with a low, like the 2016 Carolina team that won the tournament had an RPI of like 16th or 17th. Went on the road to Marquette, and then almost Marquette hit the pipe like in the last minute of that game. Could have tied it. But this one thing that's changed. 2018 Ohio State, that was the team that kind of made like a mad dash at the end of the year. I think was the first team out. They were 18th in RPI. Their 1 top 10 win was over Maryland, who was the number 1 seed. But Ohio State had bad losses to Penn State, Marquette, and Towson, which kept them out of the field. And then, famously, the 2022 Duke team that was 7th in RPI, the highest-ranked RPI team to ever miss the NCAA tournament, had 1 top 10 win over, I believe, Virginia, and then losses to Loyola, Jacksonville, and Syracuse. This brings us to the 26 Penn State and Alliance. They are currently 13th in RPI. They have 3 top 10 wins. That is more, you'll notice, than any of the teams I've listed. St. John's had 2. Harvard had 2 in 2016. Penn State has 3. They, though, have 3 bad losses, which, as you can see from this list of 7 teams, is pretty much, you got to go back to 2010 to find the last thing. Notre Dame 2010 did get in, but St. John's, Bryant, Harvard, Nova, Ohio State, Duke, none of those teams got in. 3 top 10 wins, though. I would love to see if, maybe Patrick could do this, or we can try and figure it out ourselves. How many teams that have had 3 top 10 wins have missed the tournament? Because 3 top 10 wins is a lot.
Yeah.
Like 22 Ohio State had no top 10 wins. It's definitely possible to get in the tournament without having a top 10 win. Penn State has 3. And additionally, if you go look at Mark's kind of, the teams he has clustered around Penn State, the next 2 teams out after Penn State are Yale and Ohio State. Those are 2 teams Penn State beat. Cornell is a couple spots ahead of them, but Penn State also beat Cornell. And so all the kind of teams in this blob here, Penn State beat Maryland, who was in ahead of them as well. So like all these sorts of teams that are in and around with Penn State is beaten, and they have 3 top 10 wins, but they have 3 bad losses. They are going to be a pretty historical kind of test case, I think, either way, regardless of what happens. Because ultimately, it's going to be the committee's going to have to decide what they want to value here. And I think you couldn't blame them either way, regardless of what they do. That's kind of the point of them being like a historical case.
Depending on how they finish the season, and they lose a quarterfinal, I think they just need to get to the semifinal. I think Penn State, it'll be an easier case to let them in if they're like the last one on the on the shelf with like a Yale, or if you have I think Yale's going to be like a good team to concern yourself about if you're a Penn State fan. But Ohio State, it's like Penn State is there, and it's between them and even Virginia. I think they're going to have a pretty compelling case. That the numbers are going to support the strength of schedule. So it's ironic that they lost the easy portion of a really difficult SOS, but top 5 strength of schedule. And I think what doomed a lot of the teams that Patrick well researched analyzed here is Penn State will be able to point to when it was well, who have you beaten? They're like, well, we've beaten Princeton, who may be the number 1 seed. We've beaten Maryland, who's right with us. We've beaten Cornell. We detonated them. We took care of the entire Ivy League, essentially. The top teams at Yale, throw them in there as well. So I think especially when you just kind of look at I love his spreadsheet. Penn State's got a lot of green. Yeah, got more red than anybody that's there. That's especially dark red. But I think that those wins are going to carry them through. Beat, take care of business, get to a semifinal. At least this is they get to end up being a quarterfinal because of quarterbreakers, and again to semis. I just think you can't lose the last game, and they can't stumble in the quarterfinal round, and they should be pretty good because again they 2 points is head to head. They have that trump card against a lot of the teams that are going to be there, and they have a top 5 win that's potentially be even higher with Princeton.
So depends on how it shakes out this weekend. I think we both agree they have to win this weekend. If they lose this weekend, I think at that point you're kind of just you just shut there's no toes left. You shut off 4 of your toes. They have to win this weekend. If they win this weekend and Maryland beats Hopkins, Penn State will be the 2 seed in the Big Ten, which means they'd be in the semifinals. Mm-hmm. I think that makes it a little interesting as to what happens if they beat Rutgers, who probably isn't going to get back in the top 20, maybe, but probably not, but then lose a Big Ten semifinal. What if their Big Ten semifinal loss is to Ohio State, and that kind of evens up the head-to-head a little bit. And then their record right now is they're 6-5. They're 7-6. What if Yale gets another big win somewhere in there? I think
the Hopkins loss is a big missed opportunity. You get that, and it's just you pretty much
for sure. I mean, don't lose to Michigan. They'd be comfortable if they hadn't lost to Michigan or Navy or Villanova. I think they need to feel safe. I would say 2 more wins. Similar. All Hopkins, Maryland, Penn State, the TLDR get to 8 wins. You get to 8 wins with the schedule those teams play, it's probably going to be enough.
Yeah.
I think Penn State have to win this weekend. I think if you win 1 Big Ten game, you're probably safe. Anything shy, you finish with 7 wins. I'm not saying it's unpleasant. I think what they need, having the wins and the head-to-heads, I think if they wind up in direct comparison with Yale and Ohio State and them, I think they'll be safe in that regard, just because I think having the wins is, well, not just the wins, but having the head-to-heads will take care of it. If they start adding more, if they lose a 4th at that point, because then your RPI is going to start to, and you start falling out of the RPI, the easiest thing to do for the committee would be to drop yourself to 17th in RPI, because then it's okay, they're not in the mix anymore. We can just
They're so confounding because they could lose to Rutgers and then win the Big Ten tournament, and just go in with 22 and 4 bad losses. It's just definitely a great case study that we'll be able to look back at.
It's a bizarre team. cannot get a read on them. It's what I mentioned in part, like, and that's my thing. Part of like when it's like at what point do you kind of like give up? I remember Gil in our chat was like, I'm digging in. It's like, because it's not just they won these games, it's the way they won them. They beat Princeton by 6 goals. Now, yeah, it was one quarter. You could kind of argue still, it's 6 goals. They beat Yale by 10 goals. They beat Cornell by 12 goals. They beat Maryland, Tennessee. Like, it felt like Maryland could have played for an hour. They weren't, they got up big on Maryland. They beat Ohio State by 7 goals. Like, their 6 wins this year are by an average of 40. So 42 to their 6 wins are by an average of 7 goals per game. And 5 of their 6 wins are over top 20 teams.
Well, it's
insane.
Lacrosse Reference Pros like break down the RPI is just fascinating because like, and on the first like criteria is your win-loss record, which is 25% of your RPI score. They're the lowest by
a
like
mile.
600ths of a like they're 0.4554. I guess Virginia's pretty low there at 0.58, but they're definitely still the lowest of any of the top 15. They're the lowest. Closest one after or below them is
Maryland,
and not even really like because BU's tied Penn. Penn is like below them at 0.54 and 18.
Penn's below 500.
Yeah, and it's just
So,
like if they were just like there was layups, but those are 3 winnable games, especially the 2 by 1.
If they win, here's the head. If they win those 3 games,
they may be
we're talking about Penn State for the number 1 seed.
Yeah,
like that's the
crazy thing. It's only 0.81 for win-loss record, and that that's comparable with Harvard, Princeton.
We'll be talking about them for the 1 seed. They'd be 9-2. They have 5 losses by a combined 6 goals. Now, part of you is like, hey, I mean, you flip some of those, and then the other. I think that's the beginning of it. It's like it's not just that their best has been winning games; it's that their best has been destroying teams, and their worst has been losing to teams you absolutely cannot lose to, for sure.
Throwing the ball. Yeah.
But I mean, if they got in, yeah, I'm not gonna. I mean, if they got in and played, here's good. If they played, how high up on the seed list do you have to go to get a team where you wouldn't? Like, if they played Richmond round 1, who are you taking?
Penn State.
Wow. That's crazy. I'm not saying I disagree with you, but that's crazy. Like, that, I think that gives you an idea of, like,
I'm taking Penn State against all the Ivies except for Princeton.
Okay.
That could get in there.
How about that? We'll just do this. Princeton, Notre Dame, Syracuse, North Carolina. Do you take them over any of those 4?
Potentially Syracuse on a grass field, the quarterfinal game.
I mean, if they ran into UNC again, quarterfinal. I'm not saying I wouldn't pick them. Like, I might. That game was really close, and Penn State didn't have Aquino, and Wambach dominated the faceoffs, which yes, he could definitely do again, but I mean, it's not like Penn State's still a good faceoff group, so maybe that game was really close, and Carolina had like plus 10 possessions or something like that. I mean, I think they could. Here's the easiest way of putting it. I think they could beat anybody in the field. I do. I really believe that. I'm not saying I would pick them over anybody, but I believe they could beat anybody in the field. Also, I could see them losing to Rutgers this weekend, and this conversation is over.
Yeah.
Unless they win the AQ. So, they're a fascinating team. I'm not sure we've seen one. I mean, yeah, 2010 Notre Dame is a great example. Who didn't have the wins this team had, and it did win on that run.
They definitely meet the level of the competition. Even the Hopkins team, they shouldn't have lost. I mean,
you know what it is. You know what it is a little bit. I'm not saying this is going to happen. It's a little 2016 UNC-ish. Look at some of the. You want me to tell you some of the teams 2016 UNC lost to? This will really start to like. You'd be like, oh, hang on now. 2016 North Carolina lost to. I'll just read 2016 North Carolina's like game by game. Opening, beat Michigan by 10. Beat Furman by 8. Lose to Hofstra by 5 at home. Beat Hopkins by 4 at Homewood. Lose to Denver. Lose to UMass by 5. Beat Manhattan. Beat Richmond. Lose to Maryland by 3. Beat Duke. Beat Virginia by 8. Lose to Syracuse by 6. Beat Notre Dame by 2. Lose to Syracuse by 3. That was 2016 North Carolina, who was 8-6 going into the NCAA tournament. They had beaten Notre Dame, who was the number 3 overall seed. They'd beaten Duke, who was an NCAA tournament team. They'd beaten Syracuse, they hadn't beaten Syracuse. They'd beaten Denver. No, lost to Denver. So that was their wins. They'd beaten big wins were Notre Dame and Duke. Even then, those Notre Dame was a big one, but Duke another kind of it. Beat Hopkins. Yeah, Hopkins was unseeded. But they beat Hopkins, they beat Notre Dame, they beat Duke. Lost to Massachusetts by 5 and Hofstra by 5. Those teams made the tournament. 8-6, won the national title. That does kind of read off like Penn State this year. Except, again, you could argue Penn State, I would say it's pretty comparable. Penn State has wins over Notre Dame, the 2016 Notre Dame to Princeton, kind of in the ballpark. Hopkins and Duke, kind of in the ballpark to Maryland and Cornell. 3 bad losses for Penn State. I don't know if I think Hofstra and UMass were bad losses. Maybe Hofstra was not. Hofstra's record that year was Hofstra was 9-6. 9-6 Hofstra might have been in the top 20 in RPI in 2016. Not 100% sure they might have been. UMass was 4-8. Carolina lost by 5 to 4-8 UMass, which is comparable to Penn State losing to Villanova. This Michigan team, is under 500. If Penn State, as you say, if Penn State wins 2 and then loses 1, they'd be 8-6. They'd probably get in. They'd probably be on the road.
If they miss the tournament, this schedule is the template that I use for my prediction of 2019. Because I was preseason for Penn State, I was just they were so close. They lost 5 games by 6 goals. They didn't have Grant in 2018. I'm they could really flip it around. And this is just going to look back and really be a missed opportunity, almost kind of snake bit or bittersweet, Ohio State, were kind of a wasted, Penn State's just so gifted offensively, and just to have that elite level offense kind of get squandered by a handful of losses that really, in hindsight, you're probably could played them again, at least one of those 5. I think of Penn State, especially the Hopkins win, the Hopkins loss, that just to me was just definitely just frittered away. Yeah, and as you point, just don't lose to Michigan, and they'll be in so much better position than they are now. So, yeah, if they don't make the tournament, it's definitely going to be looked back, bittersweet, and definitely a missed opportunity at least a Final Four run. It's just again the teams they've beaten. It really does feel like they rise to the occasion, and unfortunately, fall to the level of their competition as well at times.
Yeah, that just clocking that in my head that they're actually a great comparison to 2016 UNC is I feel like one of those one of those shell shock soldier. It's I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying actually when you look at it, it kind of hits. UNC lost some, bad games in there, and they were kind of right on. They had to kind of win the last weekend or so to get in. Interesting. All right, we're going to transition now to an ode this weekend of Hopkins, Maryland. The rivalry at Homewood Field. to our favorite rivalry game moments, not just Hopkins Merrill, just in sort of the annals of lacrosse, our favorite rivalry game kind of moments in college lacrosse. We had some really good ones from. I asked Ryan. I solicited his takes, and I tweeted this prompt out on Twitter, and we had some good feedback as well. Ryan, here's some from Ryan. I'll start here, safe get out of the way. Syracuse beating Hopkins and Paul Rabel's last game, the 08 National Championship. Syracuse buzzer beater win at Cornell in Ithaca in 2010, the year after Syracuse beat them in the national championship game. Ryan said, being there as a road fan, the student section was incredible. Says, take your pick of any Cuse UVA game that kind of goes crazy. Last year's Syracuse Princeton quarterfinal, which of course Ryan was in attendance for. And it also mentioned Cuse Notre Dame in the Dome in 2011. That game was like a classic Dome kind of crowd, 12,000. Billy says he will refrain from doing it as Notre Dame fans actually like him this week for having them number one in his poll. So there are some good ones from Ryan. We got some good ones from the our listeners. Brian Powell says, in D1, Maryland Hopkins is the rivalry, but D3, it's the war on the shore, Washington College and Salisbury. Chaz Bertrand, Army-Navy 1993, Army undefeated, both teams in the top 10. The game was in Annapolis, but Army brought a portion of the Corps to spectate. Renovations were going on to Marine Corps Stadium, so the game was played on the Navy practice turf on the banks of the Severn. Standing room only, surrounded for every inbounds play. Navy won 10-8. Sounds insane. David Greenfield, a good pal, has Cuse Virginia rivalry. Mentioned Syracuse beating Virginia twice in 21. Both those games were kind of big upsets. Virginia, of course, went on to win the championship that year. David also mentions the 08 Hopkins Cuse outlasting Paul Rabel's 6 goals in the championship, one of the great championship game performances. Last but not least, he mentions is Syracuse and Princeton. Talked about from mentions favorite memory was the 95 quarterfinals in the Dome. Cuse won 15-11, very intense game. Princeton would not lose again until 99 in the tournament. Who'd they lose to? Cuse 7-5 in the first round. Mentions this. I think this is actually correct, which is pretty crazy. From 92 to 03, the only team Princeton lost to in the tournament was Syracuse. Which I think that is actually, not the question, but I think that's actually, yes, 93, 95, 99, 2000, and 2002. The only team to beat Syracuse in the Princeton in the NCAA tournament was Syracuse. That's crazy. Wow. So those are some good ones. Safe, I'll throw it to you. What do you have?
Gee, so put them into groups because I think the 3 biggest rivalries are, Hopkins, Cuse, and Virginia for the Jays. I mean, I'll just kind of go with the layup here. Hopkins, UVA, 2005, Final Four game, just historic. I was at the link. It was just an amazing game, amazing moment. Stars are calling the stick check, the whirling, the winds and, trash flying around, the thunder and lightning stalwart for the game. Just, it had all the drama, just had, the teams. It was kind of the height or nearing the height of, NFL stadiums for the Final Four. It definitely felt like, kind of lacrosse was kind of on the rise. Just a wonderful moment, time. UVA was just kind of just such a bully, especially the Stargy years, and even the large years to an extent. But having that victory just was just amazing. I think I would have, obviously, the top Bible. So I'll go with Cuse, as the second tier. I actually have 3. just any Hopkins fan, I say the word Kyle Wharton and the Dome will definitely remember that 2011 just absolute like robbery at Syracuse. Hopkins overtime game, priest violation called against Kyle Wharton, which was an obvious goal. It's just one of the great moments because Cuse was still like peak Cuse, with under big Desco, and Hopkins kind of coming back after the peak of early peak of Petro's years. Was kind of like the climb back up 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, culminating but getting back to the Final Four. 2015, just kind of going chronological order, the Elite Eight game, quarterfinal game, Hopkins, Syracuse, just fan bases go back and forth on the message boards on Twitter, just like a great atmosphere, just great game. The Petro, turned into Bobby Benson. I forget who was it Ryan Brown scoring. They give him 2 goals, and he's kind of like, oh man, maybe we kept the ball there. We didn't need that goal, and then he's like, loved it at a press conference after the game. He's like, you know what, we actually did need that goal at the end. So just love Petro. Just one of the great moments. The rivalry and Hopkins coming out on top is big. Just personally, 2018 Hopkins 18-7 Cuse. Ryan just like cyberbullied me for an entire year because Hopkins lost to Princeton 18-7. It just I had him like 3rd in the country. I think the poll prior.
I think they were ranked 3rd in the country. Yeah,
I was with them. Wasn't outside of the. It was an outlier. It was a good team early on. Still a pretty good team. Just didn't make it all happen. But a year later, Hopkins beat Syracuse 18-7 in the Carrier Dome. I think I tweeted I just put like God is real. With the screenshot with like a minute left. It was just absolute amazing moment. For me, the number one rivalry, obviously, Maryland, Hopkins. Just great games. Just so much history. I was, always like compared, favorably to Duke, North Carolina, Harvard, Yale, Notre Dame, Michigan. This big historic rivalry. For me, 2 biggest moments, 2015, I was joking around, I was peak safe in Philly. Chip Kelly was the leader of the Eagles, the Hopkins was in the Final Four. I was blogging, we weren't doing all this yet because, Matt was still, that was the last season he was there. But Hopkins made the Final Four, it's it was a great season. You and me interaction first time with my first post about Maryland, never having to look back at the ACC. And then 2015 was just a great year with Hopkins getting to the Final Four and playing the Terps. I still remember it took the Friday off that we had Memorial Day weekend. I was running in Philly, had a Hopkins jersey, Hopkins shirt, just a black regular Under Armour. The Maryland bus was right in the corner of Walnut and Broad. And it definitely just kind of saluted her, gave a thumbs up. It was a great moment. And just to top it off, I legitimately mean this. One of the best moments for me, at least in the rivalry, is the 2022 game. I just being there with you. It was fun. It was kind of still post COVID. People still got, and it's just it was an absolute, a bloodbath. But I always say, it's always cool to be part of something historic. This will always be a game that people will compare to any large margin of victory. Will be oh, this is the biggest margin of victory in this series since 20. It will always be a historical milestone or landmark that we'll always be able to point to. So
the way you talk about this, it's like a war reporter talking about being there for the Somme. I witnessed history that day.
I saw them chipping at the Berlin Wall. Jake, there was this guy in the hammers, and it's just what it was. But it really was, that really was kind of first feeling of big lacrosse, kind of the thing we have of I think I saw DeMaurice Smith, and the players who just signed because it's something for Terps. I almost got hit by Governor Hogan's car. I think it was one of those.
That was 18.
The 18, yeah, I remember that because the big SUV came by that side. I was like, oh, my bad. It's just great. And packed stadium. Obviously Maryland. So enjoy that game thoroughly. But those are my list of the biggest rivalry games that are kind of Poppy's focus. But
I want to shout out at Chaz Bertrand. This is sick. We mentioned just told his sort of his he was there for the '93 Army Navy game, which they had to play on Navy's practice turf because the Marine Corps stand was in renovations. He's standing room only, surrounded every inbounds play. He actually shared a picture from it.
Wow,
this is absolutely sick. There's just like there's the core back there. I think you can see it's bottom out. It's like 12. Yeah, people up on the side. That's absolutely sick, dude. It's awesome. Shout out, Chaz. Thank you for sharing. I have a couple. 22. I saw Maryland. The two Maryland games I saw in 22. They scored 22 and 23 goals. In both of them against Hopkins and Virginia. That team you had to see that team in person to really get an appreciation for it. They were just unbelievable. And when they were locked in, it was a sight to behold. Probably the more and more I look back on it, probably my all-time favorite is the Maryland Duke quarterfinal from 2 years ago.
Oh,
like I think that's probably got because to me it's that I think that really is Tillman's like magnum opus, like winning that game. If you go back and watch the first half of that game, it's Maryland looked like, I mean, if you watch the shift in the two halves of that, not even just two halves, the fourth quarter. At one point, Maryland had like more turnovers than I have. What was it? It was something just ridiculous in that game. Duke goes up like 5-1 or something like that. At one point in this game, Maryland had 10 times the amount of turnovers as Duke did. They had 11 turnovers and Duke had 1. They were down 4 goals multiple times in that game. At one point when they got back in the game to 9-6 or something like that, or like 2-3, McNaney threw the ball at half field to like Dyson Williams. And it was just like, oh my god, this thing's over. Again, if you just watch like the two bit in that game, you'd be astonished. Maryland scored 7 goals in the first 3 quarters of that game, and then scored 7 goals in the fourth quarter. It just none of it to this day makes any sense. It's kind of like I akin it to this is the Duke team with Brennan and Sawada and Dyson Williams and Jake Naso and K. Brower. I kind of akin it to that Duke Michigan State Elite 8 game when Duke had Zion, and somehow Tom Izzo just like bamboozled Coach K into like letting RJ Barrett shoot 20-foot mid-range jumpers the whole game when Zion is just like driving to the hoop at will. It's like Brendan O'Neill scored multiple goals in that game, but it's like, okay, all right, this is, we're good. And yet, for like the middle 20-30 minutes of that game, he just never doesn't touch the ball. Like the whole second half, I swear, he never touches the ball. Maryland takes the lead. He goes down the next possession, scores to tie the game, and then doesn't touch the ball again.
It was very odd.
It's like none of it makes any sense. But beating that Duke team, there's the infamous like crowd shot where the Duke fans are just like seated, and all the Maryland fans are standing. I think Ryan was there. It's like it's just the ultimate lacrosse game runs. It's one of the craziest in-game vibe shifts I've ever seen, and it's the one that like if we all in a couple weeks are picking Maryland to make the Final Four, that's the reason. That's the one why, because like that just shouldn't have happened. It made no sense. 2 weeks before that, Maryland lost to Penn State by like 10 goals. And it's like that was the point of really reach. Had to put your hands up. I can't question Tillman ever again. Like, just, I think that's the one. I think for like single game, just fully fulfilled as a fan, I don't know if anything can top that.
Can I throw one?
Sure, of course.
I actually thought maybe it'd be comparable, like the 2021 game, the Super Duke team.
Yeah,
just battling. Like I remember.
So here's the difference with that. The 21 game, I knew they were going to beat them by that much.
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
I knew it. I think after like you.
I can remember because like I remember that season. It's like not like last man stand, but like people were like kind of going at us. Because I was like, I remember I had Maryland. I think number one. Certain points of that season, it was just like the Duke North Carolina show, and we were like, yeah, they're like, so many people were so angry at the not playing any out of conference games that they were like, Maryland was going to get exposed, and I was like, I kind of felt like vindicated is not the right word, but just like I was like, yeah, this is what we've been saying. Like, if anyone was watching this game, this Maryland team's really good, and I forgot you were like kind of quite confident. I think it was Virginia was one you were more worried about just because of the bugaboo they had.
I forget what I remember. I nailed both those Final Four predictions. Not the time I went back. I was like, Virginia will win by a little bit, and Maryland will beat Duke, and it won't be as close as people are expecting. And it was. The 24 one, I didn't expect. I mean, part of me felt like before I had to pick him, I'm like, it's a Tillman in a quarterfinal. It's just kind of he does have a good record against Danowski. Historically, I think they're like 4-1 in the tournament against them. But that game was just another pause to him. You had to give it to him. He puts Zabatello on Zawada, and sort of like just kind of like ices O'Neal out, like they kind of ice out a little bit, and just they have to pick their point somewhere. They just bet on if we stop Zawada, Brennan won't get the ball. Turned out to be true. So that one's 100% up there.
That was with Danowski just at the press conference, just kind of staring at the stat sheet for like a minute, right? Remember that?
I think that was the 21 one.
Was that 24? Yeah.
The 24 one was where he mentioned like people running on the field, and it's like, okay, all right. Some other one, the 2017 game where Rambo broke the points record. There was a huge crowd. This was the Maryland Hopkins. Rambo broke Bob Bonillo's points record. Shout out Ryan. He interviewed him on the Cross Commission podcast years ago at this point, but that interview is somewhere in the archives here somewhere. The huge crowd, awesome scene. The 2018 Maryland Hopkins game, the one you were at, that game was awesome. One of the biggest crowds. Maryland won that in like triple overtime or something like that.
It felt like the stadium was swinging, like it was windy, like it was just it's great.
So here's my thing. I cannot have a bad, like, I think to your point, like it's funny, but I think it's true. I cannot have a bad time at Maryland Hopkins. Maryland could lose this weekend. I'm gonna have a good time. It's Maryland Hopkins at Homewood. I'll say, like, it truly is one of those. If you've never been, you have to do it. It's just unbelievable. It's 10,000 people. If it's a great, like, the weather, if it's out, like it's gonna be, the sun hits you from like every angle. It's just this incredible congregation of people. It's 10,000. It feels bigger than that because you're there, because you're literally shoulder to shoulder with people everywhere. Whether you're standing on the sidelines. Incredible atmosphere because the crowd's usually like 50-50. So it has a great kind of vibe back and forth whenever either team scores. Between Maryland Hopkins fans. Being as someone from Maryland, I just think it's such a. If you're not from the state and you have no concept of lacrosse, it really is one of those things I think that like won't make sense to you. It's like a lacrosse game, like relatively middle pack, I guess you could say, Division I NCAA sport, between the public University of Maryland against the Division III, university, draws 10,000 people, more than that, every 2 years, and is honestly just as consequential to the sporting fabric of the state of Maryland as the Preakness and Orioles opening day. Like, it's just as Quinn always makes it like that's like those are. It's a pillar of sports in the state of Maryland, and if I gave you the context of it, I don't think it makes sense to like someone like who isn't aware of it. It's so unique to the state, and like again, it's like the crowd like 50-50, like there's just as many Hopkins fans there. Like, it's everything that's awesome about both schools, I think, both fan bases, and like lacrosse in Maryland, I think, is exemplified in that game. And so it's just a special kind of, again, if you've never done it, you have to do it. So at some point, some point in your life. I think those are that's kind of for me. I was trying to think of some other good ones, just kind of Army Navy. I always love. This past weekend, massive crowd. I remember there was one year I think Navy beat them in overtime. It was a pretty cool 20. I want to say 2017, 2018, I think. Navy beat them in overtime. Denver Notre Dame was a great rivalry for a long time. It's kind of stopped since, but they played some classic. I feel like every year they played, it would go to overtime, double overtime, something like that. So I think the ones you mentioned for sure, the Hopkins Virginia 05 games, one that comes to mind immediately. Petro's facial expression towards the end. I don't know if you mentioned this one, the 2012 game at Klockner.
No. Oh yeah,
that gets me thinking. The 2023 Maryland Virginia game at Klockner.
Mm-hmm.
Which just felt like a friggin' prize. I mean, it was like in the Coliseum or something. Like it was just the hot mics, the Klockner mics are historic. It was incredible. I don't know if it's Notre Dame's had some, I don't know if rivalry you call it, but they've had some pretty awesome, at Arlotta, there's some kind of classic games I remember there. I don't know which one, I don't know who they'd say is like their biggest rival in the ACC, but they've definitely had some ACC games that are kind of historic. So,
yeah. Virginia, UVA for Virginia, and she's like, maybe not instantly register as a big, but like, I feel it's like almost two teams that the style of play, some of those games, we've gone over the numbers, like the goals against, goals for pretty much the same.
They're very much kindred spirits in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
which is what makes it very fascinating, right? Because usually part of rivalries, I mean, honestly, what it reminds me, I'll give the best comparison, I would say, it's kind of like LSU Alabama. For a long time at SC, where it was like when it was like Nick Saban and Les Miles, like it was the defense. This is the reverse, obviously, but it's that kind of like, like not the contrast of styles, but the matching of styles and the way it created these just incredible, like the 9-6 LSU Alabama game, or some of those other ones where they define a specific style of the sport and the way it's played.
Absolutely.
And in some ways, the sport like follows them because of that. Like when they're good, when Syracuse, Virginia are great, everybody's kind of following in their footsteps in a way with just the style of play, because they're getting the best recruits, and that's such a game that is so. But yeah, I think you're 100% right. Yeah, it's they really are kind of they fit each other perfectly for that game.
Oh yeah, no, it's a game. That's what I love the best. You said it right. It's not the conflicting styles, but it's just like both like showing like a showcase of like just extremely high octane offense, really like enjoyable game. And like and they're just so similar, just like almost like two fighter jets going against each other. Just really, really, really good, like unique rivalry. Kind of is a little bit overlooked, I think, in terms of like the other ones.
It's special. I think I would say honestly a bit. This is one thing I've admitted a couple times this year I was wrong. I think the ACC should go back to kind of mixing it up a little bit with the schedules. I think all conferences probably do this. Virginia Cuse got more attention when it was that last weekend in February, but that first weekend in March. Now I think it blends into all the other ones. I think when it was that date, it like stood by itself, and they kept it like that. They kept it like that the first couple of years in the ACC, and now they switched. I would go back to that.
Definitely.
Because I think it'll help it stand out as kind of like a premium day. Also, it would allow Syracuse probably to schedule Cornell again, which I think Syracuse Cornell being a midweek in April. I know for the school, like the coach a little bit, I think that's maybe been a bit of a kind of bones, I guess, to pick, is that neither one maybe really wants to play it on a Tuesday. But I think that's awesome. I think it's awesome. I think it captures the attention. I mean, the last game they used to play, the Pat March ejection game, everybody was watching that. Like everybody was watching that game on that day, and I know Ryan kind of spent like when he was in school, like the kind of road, the kind of the students traveling to the game. I think that one's a pretty. Another Ken Houston, I'll never forget. this one's another one that unfortunately just has kind of lost its. It wasn't played and just kind of lost luster. Syracuse Hobart. Remember Chris sharing the video. He was like, getting egged on the bus. Like that's what makes lacrosse awesome. It's like along the lines of Hopkins, Maryland. It's like here's Syracuse going to this like formerly D3 school that went D1 specifically for lacrosse. And it's like a huge, isn't it like was like Syracuse's only trophy game?
Yeah.
For like any sport, like that's they kind of like the lacrosse rivalries are so they're so unique in a way that I don't think you get in other sports, because of the outsized impact lacrosse can have at certain schools like a Hopkins, like Hobart, that makes it really special. So that's I think that's why a lot of these are so awesome. All right, so we've got, unless you got anything else.
No, that's perfect.
We got some big ones this weekend. Unfortunately, all kind of crammed together, but you do what you got to do. 12 o'clock noon, ESPNU, number 1 Notre Dame versus number 15 Duke. Duke, pretty much, we always say there's no must-wins until there's must-wins. This is pretty much a must-win. Number 14 Army versus number 18 Loyola at Ridley. Big game to kind of decide who sort of kind of emerges from the pack and probably host the Patriot League tournament. Man, Loyola hasn't hosted the Patriot League tournament in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably since Pat. I don't think they've hosted it since Pat was there. It's pretty crazy. That's at 12. Other kind of important games at 12. Navy Lehigh is a big game for Patriot League seeding. Also at 12, number 3 North Carolina versus number 8 Virginia. Kind of, I think, low-key an interesting game for both teams. Virginia, as we talked about, I don't think they're totally like, we've had so much fun with the Lars thing, kind of the Virginia's comeback. It's like, I don't think it's like it isn't concluded yet. It's like we're kind of like at the, like in a movie, we're at like the point, like right before like the end of like the first hour, where it's like things are going great. Like they put the crew together. We've met all the members of the team. This is awesome. And it's like right before like the scene where it's like actually the job is now screwed. It could be that's where we could be going. It's like actually, guys, the cops have found out the plan. Like we have to come up with a whole new plan.
The MacGuffin isn't there. Gotta go find it another place.
Yeah, like which again, that could be the case if they lose, or they could win and they're rolling. Those games are all at 12. At 1 o'clock, number 2 Princeton versus number 9 Harvard. Tale of two teams kind of going a different direction. As you mentioned, Princeton's won 4 in a row. They blew out Penn last week. Harvard, man, it's not been looking good past couple weeks for sure. Even in wins, kind of unconvincing, and then blowout losses to Yale and UNC a couple weeks back. Again, Harvard's in the Ivy League tournament, but as far as this game is big for seeding for the Ivy League tournament because Harvard is still undefeated in Ivy League, or now has 1 loss in Ivy League play. Princeton also has 1 loss. So whoever loses this game is out of the running for hosting the Ivy League tournament. Could be like Princeton could be out of the running for hosting the Ivy League tournament. If Harvard wins, they're right back kind of in the. If Harvard wins, they actually are kind of in the catbird seat for hosting because their loss would be to Yale. Yale has 2 losses, so it would come down to Harvard and Cornell probably in a couple weeks or next week, I think actually. Yeah.
Yeah, they're Cornell.
So, whereas if Harvard loses again, they'll still make the Ivy League tournament, but probably they'll be settled at 4th. 2 o'clock ESPNU. We talked about Maryland Hopkins, a Big Ten, probably number 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament on the line. In that game, both teams a win seals on the NCAA tournament. And that's sort of, there's another TV game, Colgate Syracuse is at 5 on ACC Network. So that is another TV game in there. But the last game is at 6 o'clock. So unfortunately, it's all kind of packed together in there. But some big games of consequence for NCAA tournament implications, conference tournament, all that good stuff. Safe, what are you most looking forward to?
Yeah, kind of Hopkins, Maryland, just because, our friendship, the pod, and just, kind of an important game for both teams. So I really feel, it's going to kick off the day. Notre Dame Duke, like kind of Duke's kind of like a playing games going forward. I kind of feel even if they win this one, you don't want to leave yourself. Totally. I probably do need 2 wins at least to kind of feel secure for that. Largely, kind of like not saying that they're about to read their last rites or anything, but like this is kind of really important game. I did feel like Notre Dame, playing really well may end up being, the number 1 seed if they continue, and they're just kind of rolling. And it's just like, kind of feel like the being at home is going to be help Duke, but like, feel like I did that vibe, that game last week against North Carolina, like I don't think I've ever seen it like that. And we've seen packed and the atmosphere and stuff like that. It just really does feel like a team that just like, didn't even really stumble. I mean, they lost to Virginia, which is like a mortal sin given how well the Cavs have been playing. And I just really do feel like they are kind of rolling and just feel being bad matchup for Duke.
I think that's interesting. This is tough. I think the way these teams are playing and the vibes and all that is a bad matchup. Like it feels like 2 teams in different directions. Feels like Notre Dame is just is the better, more talented team for sure. But I guess if you could argue, if Duke is going to win one of these games, are they going to do it with their offense or their defense? It gotta be the defense, right?
Defense, yeah, just because not scoring 1 goal the last quarter against Cornell.
They held Cornell scoreless in the 4th quarter and did.
They held themselves.
Held themselves scoreless too. They held Cornell to 9 goals. Now, granted, Cornell's offense can be up and down. They played pretty good defense against Virginia. Virginia scored 11, I think, something like that. Good defense against Denver. Like Duke's defense is, I think, legit. I mean, it was the best part of that team last year. And while the only evidence I've seen of them having a really good offense is the Syracuse game, and I just that's the dome. It's I just sort of that's the obvious outlier for that team. If you look at Duke's profile, just go Lax Reference Pro. Duke's 3 of their last 4 games. Actually, I don't know. Against Virginia, 14 goals, unadjusted defensive efficiency, 38%. Yeah, the problem with the defensive argument is that Patrick Jamison seems like I'll mention this. Dino with the goalies is. We know the quick trigger we kind of joke about, but it's like Jamison has not been the same since Dino hooked him in the Cuse game. And I guess you could argue he wasn't playing well before that, so maybe that's why he's still not playing well. But it does feel noticeable that he wasn't playing that badly. He wasn't playing that badly. Dino hooked him, put in the backup, and made 1 save. And then Jamison has not played well in the 2 weeks since. But it's I mentioned this. Max Sloat and Ben Johnston took 25 shots for Duke in that Cornell game and scored, I think, a combined 2 goals, I want to say. Let me see if I can pull it up here. They scored 4 goals on 25 shots. 25 shots combined is the next. That it was at 43. They took more than half their shots. 25-43 which is nuts. I asked this question on the pod on Saturday where I was like, if Duke loses out, did the schedule actually wind up mattering? Because it's will they have they just wouldn't have the wins anyway. Where I think this to me indicates that yes, it did matter to some degree, because it's the whole argument around their schedule is that they'd get to incorporate some of these younger guys, they kind of bleed them into the lineup. By the time we got to this point, these guys would be playing with confidence, they'd kind of know their personnel, and they'd be set. It's okay, we're on April 15th, in your last game, your 2 upperclassmen took 25 of your 43 shots. You scored 7 goals. What the heck was the 2 months for? If your young guys aren't ready to contribute in this game, or if you don't trust them enough to the point where you're which look, Sloat and Johnston are probably their 2 best players, look, I don't care who your two best players are. They shouldn't be taking 25 of your 43 shots. That's the North Carolina thing we've been talking about. But, like, I don't think they're so much better than the rest to be taking that. Look, they're good players. I like them a lot. They're not Duffy and Petra.
Yeah.
Like,
And two, Duffy and Petra's quick. They've actually gone down. They were like 41%
like, I don't think,
to 33%. Yeah.
as good. I don't care who you, unless you're like Gary Gate and Paul Gate. Like, I don't think you should be taking 25 of 43 shots. But I just feel like if this is going to happen if it's going to happen for Duke, it feels like this is the type of game. It's going to be a more half court, defensive oriented. There probably isn't going to be a ton of transition. There's usually not transition in these games between Duke and Notre Dame, because Duke doesn't usually ride a lot. Now, to be fair, Duke did ride to some success against Virginia. We saw Notre Dame did struggle on the clear against North Carolina a little bit. In that kind of North Carolina wasn't able to take advantage of the opportunities. But Notre Dame did have some clearing troubles against UNC. Maybe that's an avenue Duke could use. I do kind of wonder if that's just like, if that speeds the game up too much, and maybe it just allows Notre Dame some transition opportunities. And I also mention this because I'll keep saying it's not to suggest that Notre Dame isn't a very good team, but it's more to suggest that it does feel like for this Notre Dame team, there's a very specific way they have to beat you. They have to beat you with the defense. The offense still, 10 goals in their last 6 games, they have averaged 10 goals per game. 11 against Maryland, 9 against Ohio State, 9 against Michigan, 9 against Virginia, 12 against Richmond, though it should be noted, 8 of those 12 were in the first quarter, and then 10 against North Carolina. Granted, Richmond and UNC good defenses, which do help the efficiency numbers, but in just the unadjusted numbers, 6 straight games below 30%. Turnover numbers for Notre Dame actually kind of pretty high. They've turned it over on more than 30% of their possessions for this. They're at 30.4% for the season, and it's kind of gone up in the past couple of weeks. So Notre Dame offense that ranks 16th in shooting percentage on the season, but also ranks 31st in turnovers. They average 12 turnovers per game. Not necessarily the best assist numbers, 41% assist rate. So it's a lot of kind of dodging, sort of, kind of one-on-one. They do a lot from that midfield. So it just kind of worth, noting a bit with Notre Dame is, again, it's not just they have a very good team. Like, their defense is more than capable for sure of kind of carrying the load for them, especially if Tyler Spano plays the way he does the faceoff die against Brady Wambach. This is such a tough defense. Bless you, Safe. It's such a tough defense to break down. But I guess I'm just saying, we did see Notre Dame against Virginia. The offense went quiet, and it allowed Virginia to kind of come back in that game. We saw Notre Dame against Ohio State. Ohio State team that certainly is not exactly, as we've seen, offensively gifted necessarily. Ohio State was in that game for long, long stretches because of that defense. Now, is Duke Ohio State's defense? I don't think so, but I do think Duke has the defensive personnel. They got Aiden McGuire, number 1 pick in the PLL draft. Charlie Johnson. The question is obviously Jamison for Duke. They need him to be back on his A game. If he's not, I don't see it. But if it's going to happen for Duke, I think this is the matchup. I think this is the one where it has. I don't think Notre Dame is going to me, I have not seen Notre Dame offensively put up a number that the other team couldn't match. I haven't seen that offense stake a number to where I'm like, the other team. Now, for their defense, yes. But I haven't seen Notre Dame's offense do a game where it's like, all right, this thing is out of hand. Even in the Richmond game, Richmond did claw back into that game and had some chances. And so I think Duke is going to be in this game. I guess the question is, it's going to be like one of those where it's 2 to 3 goals the entire game, and you never really feel like they're capable of coming back in it. But I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be there for Duke for long stretches if they can execute. Can they? That's the question.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right, because that's kind of how Notre Dame plays. They obviously have some games where they blow lesser opponents out, but they're not the type of team just trying to tag 16 on you. If they can beat you with 10 and control the pace of play, that you kind of seem to have no problem with that. So that kind of is a game that for Duke that they're always kind of in it. They're not a team that's going to kind of race away from you unless you kind of Richmond saw it kind of race away from them in the first segment of the game. But yeah, I hear you. They could give a good a chance, as opposed to playing your rival. I think that game against North Carolina is at Carolina. But yeah, again, my main thing was just just vibe check this. Look, 3 in a row now. Thought they would show a little bit more the fourth quarter with Cornell, just because of that. You're right. They hold a pretty potentish Cornell offense to 9, but just they're not able to muster anything in the last quarter. Just a little concerned about that. But the only other game that definitely caught my eye besides those two, kind of Cambridge. Just want to see what's going on with Harvard. How they respond. They're in the tournament for Ivy League tournament, but kind of 2 big tests in the regular season. Kind of can finish, kind of like reverse the swoon, or kind of backpedal your way to the Ivy League tournament and maybe walk your way out of a NCAA tournament appearance. If kind of lose out the rest of the way here, and then flame out in the first round, it's not going to be the greatest position to be in on Selection Sunday. So, and for Princeton, just how they've been playing, just to see if they can kind of continue. Just had such a resounding effort against Penn. Just see if they can do it again this time on the road. Kind of. Those are the 3 biggest ones that I'm thinking about when I'm looking at this weekend.
The way you said that, just kind of want to see go on with Cambridge. It gives the vibe of when you're you hear your neighbors having an argument or something. And you just kind of peek over the the fence, and it's what's going on over there? Yeah. Or it's just he just does I'm just gonna go for a walk. Just kind of I'm just gonna just scope out what's going on.
That's already there. Yeah.
It gives the vibe of what's happening. We did it last week, the trend line for Harvard, and it hadn't gotten better. For the season, offensive efficiency in February 41%, March 42%, 2 games in April 31%. Their last 3 games, 26%, 37%, 26%. Not great. Defensive efficiency, 22% in February, 27% in March. Last 2 games in April, 31%. Face-off percentage, hide the kids. February, 4 games, 53%. March, 40%. 2 games in April, 37%. It's the possession margin. February, -1 possessions per game in February. March, -10 possessions per game. April, a little bit better, -7. It's been bad. It's hard to divorce at this point. When you lose that many faceoffs, it's hard to divorce how your defense plays from the faceoff play. Either way, it's the concoction, the mix here is not good. I don't know if the defense could play better even despite the faceoff. I don't know if the faceoff is dooming the defense. I just know that when you put those 2 together, it's not a good mix.
Jake, it's amazing. They never have a possession advantage. In their wins, they're minus 4.8 in raw. In their losses, minus 11.
And for Princeton, the faceoff play has been pretty good this year. We talked about that as a previous weakness. Adjusted faceoff win percentage 60%, unadjusted 53%. Princeton's possession margin on the flip side was -5 in their first 3 games in February. It's now +2 the last in per game March and April. A Princeton offense that feels like quality of competition certainly should be noted for you, but above 40% in 3 of their last 4 games, but 42% against Penn. It doesn't. I don't feel great about it. Harvard. I do think this game feels, if they're not going to turn it around at home against Princeton after what happened against Yale, is it going to happen this year? If it's going to happen, it's got to happen this week. Or at least it's got to start this week. Yeah. At least you got to be it's got to be a close. It's got to be a 1-goal, 2-goal game. You got to be in the game.
Got turned into a turning point like Lawrence did after the Maryland game.
Exactly. It's like maybe you lose, but like at least if you're in the game, you play well. You figure some things out defensively at the faceoff dot that you can still carry through to the Cornell game in the Ivy League tournament. If you get blown out again, like I don't know. Hopkins Maryland, I think, is really good with both teams in the sense of I think both teams are looking for that complete performance a little bit. I think Maryland, you could argue, kind of got it last week against Rutgers. To what degree Rutgers is obviously the last place team in the Big Ten. If Maryland this week can put it together, the last game these two teams played at home field, it was 7-5. I felt like those teams could have played to midnight, and they weren't hitting 10 goals. Hopkins defense has played in Big Ten play again. It's always hard to tell these Big Ten games. We know they go, but Hopkins defense in Big Ten play has been kind of their strength. They could have won the game against Ohio State. Should have won the game against Rutgers. Against Penn State, the defense held up really like late in the game. Helped Penn State to one goal the last 25 minutes, something like that. Hopkins offense, which had shown some positive signs, I would say in non-conference play, has kind of gone a bit. But which again, this is Big Ten play. This can happen. Good offenses can go kind of wanting a bit. But like Matt Collison last week against Ohio State, I would say probably had one of his worst games. If you're Maryland and you can put together another, I'm not saying like the Rutgers game, like you're not going to beat Hopkins by 10 goals. But if you're Maryland, you can score 12, 13 goals in this game, and you can kind of win 12-8, 13-9. That to me is like, okay, this team might be kind of pointing in the right direction. 2 straight really good games on offense. 3 of the last 4 games, if you include the Michigan game, the Ohio. Because to me, it's like Maryland's won 3 in a row, which they had not done all season. Their offense has played really well 2 of the last 3 weeks. I need to see if that Ohio State game is like an outlier that's just based on this is what Ohio State does. It's the best defense in the country, and they just get everyone into that game. Or if like Maryland wins this 8-6, look, if Maryland wins, I'm going to be thrilled. Don't get me wrong. But if they win it 8-6, I'm going to be like, all right, the offense is probably. But if they can put a good number up there, if that offense this can play kind of the way they did last week, I'll be like, all right, we might have something. Like it might be pointing in the right direction. And that is what I need to see. I need to see really like Maryland string. This would be 4 straight wins, and it'd be 2 straight complete performances, 3 of the last 4. Then I'm starting to really, buy in again. To really like not just like get them to get in, but like, okay, this is a team that could get the championship weekend. Whereas for Hopkins, I think early in the season, the offense had some performances, I would say, that like kind of carried them, but the Virginia game is the best example. They played really well. They played well against Navy or like Loyola. Now it's been the defense that's kind of the past. And the offense, to be fair, the offense did play really in this Penn State, but it's been more the defense in Big Ten play. If you're Hopkins, I feel like you're still searching for that, like, because Hopkins' 2 best wins, the Penn State and Virginia games, are both comebacks. You are kind of, I feel like you're still looking for like that one, like, comes together. That's their best performance. This is a team that could maybe go on a run. So I think both teams are kind of still searching for that one really complete game to be like, all right, it clicked. It's clicked now for us. Will that happen? I don't know. This is Hopkins, Maryland. It is usually a slower paced defensive that game. Doesn't mean there can't be goals, but usually it's very physical. What was it? The 24th, Garrett Degnan took like that 3-minute unreleasable. It's always physical. You got to bring your chin strap. Always can get into kind of a slower paced, deliberate game. So I'm not saying I expect goals, but I think both teams, if they want to not just win, but kind of feel like they've clicked, I think are both still kind of searching for that complete performance.
No, I agree. Hopkins had some great wins, but putting themselves in such big holes for them to like claw out of. Love to see like a more balanced performance. I agree, especially on that stage. The homecoming should be really great atmosphere. You'll be in attendance. Should be a great game.
All right, absolutely. Those are the games this weekend. Some big ones. It will really set the table for the last week of the regular season. And then obviously when we get into conference tournament play and towards Selection Sunday in a couple weeks here, I'm excited for it. All right, Safe, finish up here. This is a new thing we've had the past couple weeks here. Safe will just like DM me like an hour before the show, and basically he'll just be like, "Jake, I want the ball."
I saw in the corner.
Feed me the rock, and I'm like, all right, it's like you want the ball, you got the ball. So I'm
actually thinking of this.
I'm drawing it up in the huddle, and I'm just like, all right,
minutes.
Set a screen. I'm gonna run and set a screen. Safe's gonna get freed up. We're gonna get Safe on a short stick. He's gonna take it behind the cage and he's gonna go to work.
Exactly. No, I love it. It's like an Andy Rooney. 60 minutes. It's actually something I thought of last week. Then kind of the threats. So Rutgers related. Obviously we have teams where the partial to, and Rutgers being the team for Jersey, like because it's a little bit closer. Yeah, I've been to a lot of games at SHI. Had a lot of fun. Good amount of games against really great opponents. I saw the wonderful Pat Spencer there in his his senior season with just like a great gladiator, Maximus performance of just like kind of turning into the crowd. The Jersey atmosphere is great. Like the fans are really fun. Remember one kid who's like 12 years old was at that literally had a Hopkins hat on and just kind of looks at me. He's like, "Well, it sucks." He's like, as his mom's like driving by and like like a Benz SUV. It's just a great moment in time. It's just funny. But I think we saw a lot of people bantering because I'm pretty sure this is going to be the last year for Breck's contract. There's a NewJersey.com article where they break down all the coaches' current standings. It was published in 2025. It's behind the paywall, but if you search Breck lacrosse, like the part about Breck is kind of shown in the Google results, and it does confirm his latest deal, which runs through 2026, was signed in September 23rd, 2021. Now remember that 2021, 2022 was like kind of peak Rutgers, Final Four run, got an Elite Eight run, quarterfinal run, where they fell short against Carolina, and then returned back and got into the Final Four. So don't want to sell Breck short. I think there were some dark times at Rutgers. Just the state of the program, and I think Brett should be given credit and for turning it around. And while not consistently making the tournament since they've been in the Big Ten, got a couple of those snake bitten years early on. Where Hopkins kind of made the tournament. They did in 2016. Most notably come to mind. I thought he's done a decent enough job, at least turning Rutgers into a respectable team. And, I don't want to say feared, but, they're pretty much beating everyone but Maryland, those 2021, 2022 years. So it was a, decent accomplishment that, it has to be acknowledged. But aside from that, and really had a lot of tournament success and, up to last year, at least Wikipedia 106 and 97. And with this year's record, we're not going to see much change in the winning percentage. So you kind of are at a point of continue on with Breck or go another way. And we kind of always said, kind of have coaches play out their last year of their contracts, kind of the school's way of saying, we'll see how this goes, but also if it doesn't go the way we would like, you're not firing a coach, which does matter a lot. I think in the cross circles, letting a coach play out his contract as opposed to terminating him with years remaining. So if you're Rutgers, you got to kind of think about who we are, what can we get? I can kind of see it like that. It's they kind of see a little, if you squint your eyes just enough, you can kind of see the Cotto Maryland situation where Maryland felt like we want better. Maryland and Rutgers are two separate galaxies. I'm not, as programs and historically. But
honestly, I'll say this. I think a better comparison maybe is what Penn was in last year.
I was going to go to the next, but you're 100% right. Yeah, and in both situations, the school, like, it was Cotto just played out, right? That wasn't like let go from remember
No,
correctly.
Cotto got an
And
ultimatum. Cotto got an ultimatum.
make it or don't, and then didn't make it, and they didn't.
It was
Yeah.
basically he going into his last year. They like let him play out the string, and it was Maryland. So, like, this was known. It wasn't like a secret. Like with some coaches, it's not, their contract status is pretty murky. You can't really tell. I'll get to Brex in a moment, but yeah, Cotto basically was like, ultimately, it's like, you're either gonna make the Final Four or you're let go, and they didn't make the Final Four, and it was basically just like, yeah, like that's he's done. That was the expectation. In Cottle's case, it was that 2010 was that senior class didn't make a Final Four. They went 4 straight years without making Final Four, and that was considered to be one of his best teams, and they didn't make it, and so it was like, all right. But yeah, like he really did get put on the clock. Like,
Yeah,
you got to make the Final Four. That's it.
and same thing with Penn and Murphy. Like, coach been there a long time, decentish amount of success, not as much as maybe the program wanted, and maybe missed an opportunity. In the year where they, 2019, where they, failed to get to the Final Four against, the elite Yale team.
Or even the year Rutgers made it, 2022, Rutgers beat Penn.
And then exactly
that one, I think that was even more of the one for Penn. You could look at and be like, that was our year to do it.
That was the one. Yeah. So I guess what it really comes down to is, like, I think re-signing Brecht is a safe decision. No pun intended. But I think that you've kind of made a point, like, especially with Crosse, there are not many Big Ten teams that are just on.
No,
it's a scarce resource, and you could make a case that Rutgers is the bottom tier of the Big Ten, but kind of like in succession, being the bottom of the top is not a bad place to be. Like Greg, Greg said it, the bottom of the top, and it's like it's what Rutgers has shown. Like, they kind of had gone to, like, not the heights of the heights, but got to a Final Four. Yeah, it was in. Not have been able to repeat, but and I just look at, like, Richmond is just like, not Richmond at all. Great program, love what Jamadi's done. It's just like, I don't know. We have the data here, but I gotta believe just Rutgers, by being they're just spending more on the program, just resources and just the ability. Like, and I feel like if you get the right coach, like, I don't see why you can't have more sex. Then, like, it's kind of similar thing to Ohio State is another, team maybe with but significantly more resource and probably much more attractive a place. I don't exactly know Myers's Big Nick's current stat, but I was like, if I'm like a Rutgers, you may want to take a swing. And it goes back to your point of, like, right now lacrosse in the Big Ten it is just dragging you to hell. And just seeing who survives, those 60 minutes or potentially more. And it's just like, first to 7, maybe, be able to win. And
literally in some cases, yeah.
Yeah. And maybe this is the time to zag. And if you can, I think you don't make the move unless, I don't want to, like, name names and just throw through. But, like, there are a couple assistant coaches that I think, like, meeting of the minds, they want to get a bump. I think it's worth the risk.
There's a couple obvious names that come to mind for me.
But who I've number one on my list. I love it.
I mean, it's Jesse, right?
I was going to say Jesse too, but I was going to say, big money, money making Mitch.
Oh yeah, I'll go with 3. I'll tell you. I mean, let's put a pin in that, and I'll come here. Unless you had anything else you wanted to.
No, it's just my point. It's like, this is the point where, maybe people will be like, oh, what is Rutgers expecting? Like, Rutgers expecting, we're a Big Ten team. It's kind of one of the top conferences here. It's a desirable conference to play. We do have resources on, maybe not of the top part of our peers, but, like, of conference mate. It is going to be a salary bump for pretty much 95% of the coaches out there. It's 100% of the assistants. So, like, and you may get, like, not just lucky. Like there are really talented assistant coaches that are looking for these type of positions. There's not that many ACC jobs. There's not that many Big Ten jobs, and there's not that many Ivy League jobs. And you can maybe even shrink the Ivy even more than like the really desirable Ivy League job. Every ACC job is desirable. Every Big Ten job is desirable. You know, like you may not get Lawrence to leave Virginia, but you know what I mean, like you could get like a significant amount of head coaches and definitely a high number of assistant coaches. And I think it maybe, I'm not trying to get Brett runs a good, decent program, little thing early on in his career. But aside from that, like, runs a good program. Like, the players, you know, they have the news. They had the Final Four in there. Like, and I'm saying, like, I'm not trying to disregard that or just, like, you know, be ungrateful. I'm not like a lifelong Rutgers fan, but it's like, understand what he's done to help steady the ship, get him through the Big Ten like transition, and be more than a respectable team, a good team. It just like maybe now it's the time to like change, and like the way every other team in the conference plays, this could be an opportunity to just like zag when everyone's zigging, and you can just like have a different style of play, and it just makes you stand out even more. You stand out more in a big time conference. And New Jersey's just like loaded with recruits. Not Maryland, but it's a lot of recruits there.
This is saying you're hitting a lot of pivotal points here. The one thing that you mentioned, like, this is a conversation. The only reason we're having this conversation is this is an article from NJ.com from back in August. From let me get the author here. Brian Fonseca. This is in August of 2025. Per his article here, it lists Brecht's salary at $267,000. Not bad. But it says that his contract, his latest deal, which was signed on September 23, 2021, runs through the 2026 season. We are having this conversation only because it appears that his contract is up at the end of this season. If it's not, this is a moot conversation. Rutgers athletic department it's been noted for a long time. The money situation is, you know, unstable, unsteady to say the least. I do think Rutgers has some donors, kind of along like that do care about the program, are willing to invest. They've got good facilities. There's been kind of just, I know some noise around the program that they're willing to kind of participate in the NIL space a little bit with funding scholarships, things like that. So I do think they have some ones that are, you know, willing to kind of put some money out there. But Rutgers is not going to fire Brian Brecht with term left on his contract. I would be shocked. But if his contract is up, well, then it's a decision. It's just simple. Like at the end of the day, like you have to make a decision. It's not like it's not being, you know, like pejorative to him in any sort of way, but it's just a matter of the fact they have to make a decision. And I think you have two roads. It's very similar to me in the sense. The reason I brought the Penn one was because I think both Brecht and Murphy took over programs that were kind of, you know, had prior success and kind of had some history, proud kind of programs, alums, but hadn't really been relevant in a while. Now, Volker did make the tournament twice at Penn in his run, lost in the first round twice, but he was 42-51. He won 45% of his games, and he won 40% of his Ivy League games. I'm not saying it's bad, but, you know, compared to what Murphy did, it was a significant leap. Before that, Mark Van Arsdale was the coach at Penn for 5 years. He won 41% of his games and 33% of his Ivy League games. Just go back. Penn from when Tony Seaman left in 1990, for like the next 10, 13 years, I mean, they were in the doldrums in the Ivy League pretty much yearly. Murphy came in there and took him to 4 NCAA tournaments, won 3 Ivy League tournament championships. We talk about like Mike Murphy meaningfully upgraded Penn lacrosse and gave them their best run of success since the 80s. Brecht is a pretty similar case. Jim Stagnata was the coach before Brecht. He went to 2 NCAA tournaments, lost in the first round in both cases. But that was early in his tenure, 2003 and 2004. From 2005 to 2011, Jim Stagnata was 39 and 59 as Rutgers head coach, and they were his last 2 years in the Big East. They were 3-9. So like Stagnata won 41% of his games and 33% of his conference games. Brecht has won 52% and 41%, and Brecht in the Big Ten is the Big Ten the past couple years significantly tougher than I would say. significantly tougher. Notre Dame and Syracuse were the Big East, but on the whole, I think the Big Ten's a tougher league than the Big East was when Stein was there. And also, the Big East is the Big Ten is certainly far tougher than the ECAC was. Listen, the ECAC was a good league, some really good teams in there. It's just different. It's different, cut. Rutgers as a program won 2 NCAA tournament games before Brian Breck got there. Brian Breck just won 3, and he went to a Final Four. So when you won 2 NCAA tournament games in your history, and one guy wins, when one guy has more than half of your NCAA tournament wins, that's saying something. You have to certainly give due to what he's done. However, Rutgers the past 4 seasons is 5-13 in the Big Ten. They finished tied for fifth, and they're looking at potentially a 6th place finish. It hasn't been it's a long way from that Final Four and the quarterfinal the year before. We're not talking about they're not at the level like they were in 2016 or 17 or 18. They're not. These aren't those teams. They're not really in the mix to make the tournament. It's not like we've been having conversations about come the end of the year about Rutgers on the bubble. They haven't been. And so the reason I ask this is that when we had the Murphy discussion, we were like, 2 things can be true. One, Murphy can have had a successful tenure at Penn and can have done a good job. And also this could be the point. You can say, and as I did, I'm not sure the next coach is going to do better than he did on the balance of his tenure. But also, if you're going to extend a coach, like in Breck's case, how many years are you going to give him? UNC gave Bresci 3. Most lacrosse contracts are 4 or 5 years. Now, I would say, here's what I would say. I think the UNC with Bresci, I think would maybe prove now, granted, this is UNC. UNC is a little different. A coach is going to argue, you can't give me 3 years because I'm not going to be able to recruit. Bresci proved that wrong, but again, Bresci does coach at UNC. It's a little different. But are you going to if you give Brian Breck if you re-up him, he's probably going to get a deal to the end of the decade. Is that the decision you want to go with? Because at that point, once you make that decision, you are basically marrying yourself. It's like getting married again. It's not. You're not going to fire him next year. And so, do I think the next coach of Rutgers will do better than Breck did over the course of his tenure? I'm not sure. Do I see a path for Rutgers with Breck the way things are going in the next 4 years to suggest this team's going to get back to a Final Four? I'd have to say no. I don't see that in front of them. And if that's the case, I think making a change is a more than justifiable decision. I just think it's that's the question. It's not about you could argue. I think you can argue both ways on Breck's tenure. You could say 2 tournaments in 10 years in the Big Ten. On the other hand, you could say quarterfinal and a Final Four, and a couple other teams that you mentioned that could have come close to making the tournament, or had good arguments. Being competitive in the Big Ten, his first 5 years in the Big Ten, they were 10 and 15, but that was with a 1-4 finish in 2016 and 2019. The Big Ten, they went 9 and 11, basically 500. Had some good teams, and then the next 2 years they went 8-2 and 4-1. At one point, Rutgers was pretty much right about 500 in Big Ten play, which is pretty good. I mean, it's not Maryland level, but it's not bad. So I think, can you do? I think you could argue certainly a better coach can maybe come in there and do better. I think you could also say, hey, when you consider the full context of what Breck did, or what he came into and took over, going into the Big Ten, when you consider where Rutgers was in comparison, the Big Ten has changed so much. When the Big Ten started, people weren't looking at the Big Ten with Rutgers and Michigan and being even Ohio State to a degree, and being oh man, this is a super conference. This has become that kind of level of conference in large part, not just because of Penn State and Hopkins and Maryland, but because Rutgers and Michigan came along too and became teams that could be. Rutgers has beaten Maryland last year. They've beaten Hopkins and beaten Penn State, and obviously they went to a Final Four. The question is, do you think that the program is going to be meaningfully do you want to commit yourself again to 3 to 4 more years? Do you believe that the next 3 or 4 more years are going to be better than these? And I don't think they are. I don't see it. I don't see it for a couple of reasons. One, we talked a lot about Rutgers' portal strategy and things like that around a couple of years ago. And I know you were in favor of it, and I was in favor of it to a degree. And I think my reservations have borne out a little bit in the past couple of years was that I supported it wholesale when you were bringing in the Kirsts, and even when you were bringing in guys like Bartolo the next year and things like that. My thing was eventually this is going to dry up. And what's going to happen after? And it dried up, and I think Rutgers committed to it far too long, much longer than they should have. Rutgers went in the portal like 2 years past where it was really full of game-changing type players, and they didn't get anything out of it. And so not only did that not help those teams, I think it meaningfully hurt their relationships with high schools and high school recruits. And look, it's tough. And this gets into the broader context of Rutgers as a job, which is that I tweeted this out. I'm like, Rutgers is a difficult job. Like there's some limitations, and then people kind of shot back, and I'm like, fair. I need to kind of, phrase this. Rutgers is probably out of the Big Ten ACC jobs. It is. I would say it is. It's 11 out of 11. If we include the Ivy League in there, I would say Rutgers is in the bottom 3 or 4 with Brown, Dartmouth, probably those 3. Maybe Harvard, Penn, maybe. However, to your point, those are the jobs we're talking are better. Like here's the jobs that are clearly better than Rutgers: the 5 other Big Ten jobs, the 5 ACC jobs, Princeton, Cornell, and I'd probably say Yale. That's 13. I'm not sure there's any other job that's clearly better. Once upon a time, I would have said that Loyola was clearly better. Once upon a time, I would have said that Denver was clearly better.
Yeah.
I would have said Navy was clearly better. I'm not sure that's the case anymore.
No.
Like the path in the Big Ten, in these big leagues, and what we talk about with like the way early recruiting changed and the way now with the NIL and things like this, I'm not really certain that. Now, here's the point you could argue again. Is your path to the NCAA tournament, maybe you could argue, like that's the only argument you can make if you're at a Navy or if you're at a Loyola or at a Denver. It's like, Georgetown's better than Rutgers. I forgot Georgetown there. I do believe Georgetown's better. That's like 14 jobs. I don't even know that your path to the NCAA tournament, Loyola or Navy, is better than it is at Rutgers. Now, granted, like Rutgers hasn't been able to get at large bids. I would say maybe, I know this has been a criticism towards Brecht about the scheduling. I know Rutgers can argue that they've tried and its scheduling is difficult. I would still say that there's changes. I would look at Rutgers' schedule and be like, you can do a little better here. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say it's their fault that they haven't been able to get enough like ACC teams on the schedule, things like that. I'm sure they'd like to do it, but look, the bottom line is if you go back and look at those schedules in 2016, 2017, the schedule is a big part of why they missed. And you got to. I think there's just better things you could do if you're Rutgers. There's some teams they play that just like this is going to make it harder for you. We talk about it. The line that the line they tiptoe in non-con play is really tough. So I think that's part of it. And I think to your point, like yes, like there just isn't the relationship there between Rutgers and the high school programs in New Jersey at the moment. And I think part of it is like again, I fully support what Rutgers did with what they like. It got them a quarterfinal and a Final Four. Like it was worth it. I think the fact that they didn't then have high school classes coming down the pike after that, that's a mistake. They have not parlayed that success into better recruiting, which is part of the whole big thing about having success is that it makes it easier to sell your program. And they haven't done it. They have not done it. And listen, recruiting in New Jersey is difficult, even for Rutgers. Like it's the big high schools is Del Barton, which brings in brings in players from different parts of the country, things like that. So it's not like all those kids are like native to New Jersey. But like a lot of them have gone to Villanova, which is let's jump on the road. Hopkins kind of has a pipeline up there now. There's definitely other. That's not the only one. There's other schools in a lot of town in New Jersey, and Rutgers hasn't been in that mix. And so, yes, is Rutgers at your point? It's like, yeah, Rutgers is a tough job within the context of its neighborhood. Its neighborhood is still nicer than about 90% of Division I. And that's the point. Is like, if you are one of these assistants, to your point, these are the jobs you wait for. An ACC job has not opened in the last 5 years. In fact, I would say, when you consider that Syracuse didn't really open, an ACC job hasn't opened in the last 10 years. 10 years it's been since an ACC job truly last opened. In the Big Ten, the last time a job opened was 2018 or 2017 with Connery. or Hopkins, Milliman. I forgot. So basically,
big DP.
In the last 10 years, these jobs have opened like 3 times.
Yeah.
These jobs don't come open, and they're the best jobs you're going to get. Like, and so this is early. Like, I'm not, doing candidates is kind of like early, but like I think of 3 that pop out, like I'm just like, you mentioned Mitchell. Yes, 100%. Jesse Bernhardt, former Rutgers assistant. 100% makes a bunch of sense. Other one I think makes 2 actually. 2 more make a bunch of sense. Syracuse, Pat March and John O'Dierna.
Oh yeah, we love John. Yeah.
I think both of those guys make a bunch of sense. They're both kind of, around the area. Have had a bunch of success. Young guys.
I love that. That's like, you need a young boy, not like kid, but just grow with him, and then the assistants. That's all they do is recruit and coach.
Yeah, Rutgers needs to, whatever the next decision they make is. If it's gonna be Brecht, it's like you have to reestablish connections with those in New Jersey. I'm not saying Rutgers has to like keep New Jersey on lock, but they got to get some guys.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they got to get their share of guys. It's like we talked about, like when Rutgers was bringing guys from Jersey, like in the portal and things like that. It's like that's great, but like, what about getting them out of high school?
Yeah,
like what about getting them for 4 years? Yeah, like it's like if you can get them for 1, like and so I think it's an interesting conversation because it's like if you're Rutgers, again, over the totality of Brecht's tenure, has he done what I would say is about a fair job? 100%. He made a Final Four. Like I don't think you can look at the totality of his tenure and be like, man, he underachieved. But I do think you could look at it and be like, hey, when the deal's up, you have to make a decision. You either have to get, again, basically, renew your vows and commit to this again for another 4 or 5 years. If they want to make a change, it's a really easy time to do it. You're not firing him. You can wish him on his way. You're not paying any extra money to do it, and it's all freed up to go and get who you want. And yeah, I think it's a tricky conversation. It's like both things can be true. One, for whoever steps into this job, it's going to be a challenge. You're in a tough neighborhood. You're going up there with Tills and with Tams, and Hopkins is still Hopkins in terms of recruiting, and even within that league, still it's been a team that's had success. I mean, it's recruiting its next couple recruiting classes are better than it's had in a while, and it's a team in the mix for the NCAA tournament every year. Ohio State certainly is proven itself it can have good teams. Within your own kind of geographical, you've got Princeton in state. You've got if you could just go to New York, you've longer, but still like within that region, some big heavy hitters. But also, it's a Big Ten. It's a Big Ten job. Like these jobs don't open up, and if you're saying no to Rutgers, you're basically just saying I'm only going to take like 3 jobs. Like that, which in some cases maybe sure a coach might do that, but like we saw, look with Penn, the Penn thing definitely changed my mind on it because I thought Penn was like the timeline that they did it in, kind of the way it happened. I was like, with how the Ivy's shaping out, I'm like, man, I don't know. And they pulled Taylor Ray, a sitting head coach. That to me suggests like I think Rutgers definitely can get, if they opened, could definitely get a quality candidate. A sitting head coach, I don't really know who would come to mind necessarily. I think the assistants are the ones that jump out like a bunch, or some of those names. I'm sure if we thought about it more, we could think about it. And look, this is an off-season conversation, but I think it is a conversation worth having. If it's true that his contract is up, they're going to have these conversations too, and we'll see what happens from there.
Well, they may tip their cards if Rutgers hires Penn athletic director Alana Wren to the staff. The Grim Reaper of longtime head coaches. Ms. Wren does not mess about.
Does Rutgers need an AD?
She like comes in as an outside consultant. Like
consultant. Search for
yeah, dude. Yeah. When Wren, she's like Omar. Like, Wren's coming. Like Omar coming. Yeah, but appreciate the space. Yeah, as I said, like it's not clamoring to get rid of Brecht. not also saying like he can't go. It's just like this is a legitimate time to think what you want. And I really depend. I was trying to make that case about like with Maryland, where like who does Maryland think they are? You know, like to kind of maybe anticipate some people saying that with Brecht if they don't resign. But your Penn argument is right. It's like you don't know what's out there until you maybe take a look. You know,
Yeah.
and yeah, getting Ray was a coup. Like I mean, I know that like race to the horse, you know, jump out the gates this year, but you know, they've been a really competitive team. Looks like to be on upswing, and you know, just a different energy and vibe. Yeah, Penn. You know, Penn Rutgers could maybe get some of that, especially with the right assistant.
All right. Good show. Power Hour coming this Saturday. We'll see what time. Maybe earlier, but it's tough. I have to be back from Homewood, and Syracuse Colgate is at 5. So we'll see what Ryan kind of thinks. Definitely will be earlier than the past couple weeks. We've had a lot of fun with these shows, a lot of engagement, a lot of people in the chat. If you haven't tuned into one of them, they're a bunch of fun. Talking all the games, come hang out. You can find those there at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Crosse Commission. Subscribe to the channel. This pod will be up on YouTube. Smash the like button, like the video. If you're listening to it the old-fashioned way, that is good as well. And we'll have Mark Hart at Fieldy Stick on Twitter on next week to do some another bracketology round. And then it's coming down the stretch for conference championship weekend and Selection Sunday, which we will be live for as well on YouTube Sunday night. So make sure to tune in for that.
Great
All right,
show,
friend.
Jake.
Good stuff. Thank you, Safe. Thank you all for listening. Get your taxes done. Stay hydrated. It's warm out there. Thank you, Mr. President.
See you out there.